Chapter 165. According to the movie that Su Xinxing had watched, as long as the elevator went to the 4th floor, the 2nd floor, the 6th floor, the 2nd floor, the 10th floor, and the 5th floor, some strange mechanism would be triggered, and the elevator would start to cross worlds. After reaching the 5th floor according to the sequence, a woman would enter the elevator. However, at this time, he couldn't look at her or talk to her, otherwise, something irreversible would happen. Finally, after pressing the button for the 1st floor, the elevator would reverse to the 10th floor. At this time, when he stepped out of the elevator, he would have arrived at a different world. Although at first glance, it looked no different from the original world, in fact, other than the person who did this, there were no other humans in this world. Of course, Su Xinxing also saw on the internet that there were netizens who did the same thing according to the plot of the ghost story in the movie. The result was not good. They were chased out by the property management who found the elevator abnormal. All in all, after Su Xinxing pressed the buttons according to the sequence in his memory, nothing happened. Even when he reached the 5th floor where the so-called mysterious woman would enter, nothing happened. This made Su Xinxing feel quite regretful. He really wanted to see what the so-called mysterious woman in the different dimension was. In fact, because this so-called elevator, which looked no different from a wooden cabinet from the outside, could not feel the acceleration of ascension or the sense of weightlessness when descending. It could only be seen from the flashing LED lights, which always gave people the feeling of a cheap toy. All in all, this made Su Xinxing wonder if he had made a mistake. In fact, this thing was just a decoration. Or this thing had nothing to do with the ghost story, and he was just thinking too much. However, recently, other than the prank of foreigners, it seemed that this ghost story was the only thing related to box elevators. Just as Su Xinxing pressed the last button with the word 1, without much hope, the button did not light up. Instead, it was the button with the word pick up that lit up. Then, as if the elevator had arrived at the station, the door of the cabinet opened automatically. This made Su Xinxing quite surprised. One had to know that this thing was just an ordinary manual wooden door. Outside the door was no longer the interior of the exhibition hall. Instead, it was a pure white space dotted with azure blue dots. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that those dots were actually small windows, and the azure blue outside was a considerable distance away from the windows. Earth? Excuse me, did I just take a freaking elevator directly into the universe? Su Xinxing rubbed the space between his eyebrows with his soft meatball, feeling a little confused. No matter what, if they didn't take action, the problem wouldn't be solved. Therefore, even though his mind was in a mess, Su Xinxing still walked out of the elevator and came to the pure white space. When they walked in, they realized that the space wasn't that big. It was just that at first glance, it was completely white. That was why they had the illusion that it was vast and boundless. The space was in the shape of 2 inverted plates with a height of about 2 meters. If Su Xinxing was still in his human form, he would probably feel a little depressed because of this height. The specific area of the space was unknown, but it was estimated that it was at most no larger than the sports field of Jiangjin. In addition, there was also a problem with the gravity in the space. It was about twice the gravity of Earth. Just as Su Xinxing didn't know where to go, 2 small creatures appeared at the end of his vision. They were much taller than the Girona dwarfs they encountered before, but they were not more than 1 meter tall. They had thin bodies and large heads. What was more eye-catching was the pair of big black frog-like eyes on their heads. In short, it was a very typical little gray man, Roseville aliens, who wrote, "I am an alien," on their faces. The 2 little gray men started to talk, and the pronunciation was different from any language on Earth. However, Su Xinxing's ability still worked as usual, and he could understand the conversation between them. An unidentified creature has appeared in the spaceship. Photon computer, performing biological scan, species confirmed. It is an alien species, known as the Meow alien, by the people on Earth. Its body is black and has a tendency to shed fur. Meow, hey, don't talk to yourself over there. Don't you have manners as a species? Su Shenxing arched his back and made a threatening sound like a real cat. The two little gray men took a step back and continued to whisper to each other. Scan complete. This state indicates that its mood is unstable and needs to be appeased. How do we appease it? According to the information from the Earth's information network, slapping this creature's buttocks can make them feel happy. What a perverted creature. I think so too. Su Shenxing. Angry, about 10 seconds later, the two little gray men with scratches all over their bodies hugged each other and shivered. Earth is too scary. I want to go back to my zenith. Ditto. Aliens were nothing new for Su Shenxing. Not too long ago, there was an alien princess from Centaurus who lived in his Sakura apartment for a period of time. He had also asked him about aliens before. In fact, the Earth was not really an isolated island in the universe. As early as 1961, humans had the first so-called fifth type of contact with aliens. Using friendly messages to contact alien civilizations. The plot in E.T. was the fifth type of contact. Of course, they were not in contact with the Celestial Empire, but with the self-proclaimed hope of mankind. Similar to the East Asian monsters, for some reason, aliens always appeared in the Western Hemisphere, especially in the Western Hemisphere. If the data held by the Centaurus princess was correct, there were about 1,500 aliens on Earth. Most of them were in the Manhattan area and were under the jurisdiction of the MIB. Su Shenxing did not know if there was a similar organization in the Celestial Empire. Before he met Su Feng, he did not even know about the existence of the Super Administrative Office. Su Shenxing sat on the ground and stared at the two little gray men hugging each other. He thought for a while and asked. Meow, why does the door behind me lead to a museum on Earth? Oh my God, I can understand the language of this terrifying alien. This is too scary. Zenith, go back to Zenith. Su Shenxing, how should he put it? Su Shenxing had traveled extensively, experienced interstellar wars, and even fought head-on with the Centauri rebel fleet. He had seen countless aliens. But this was the first time he saw such a cowardly alien. In his words, Meow, you are the worst aliens I have ever seen. Chapter 166. Survivors of the space accident from 10 years ago. In a small office in the corner of the Jiangjin Public Security Bureau's Criminal Police Brigade, several people with special identities were welcomed. Su Feng threw the document in his hand on the table and looked curiously at the people who brought it in. Although the incident was due to an accident in space, the higher-ups didn't make the whole thing public, but as far as I know, there shouldn't be any survivors, right? 3 people went up, and the recovered bodies were also 3, and they all died of pressure loss. That's what we thought, but something doesn't seem right. Because the astronauts signed an agreement, if they sacrificed their lives for the country, we can conduct research on their bodies. So, after confirming the cause of the accident, we didn't cremate them directly. Instead, we planned to conduct some research. But the problem is, after a few years, one of the bodies has never changed. It didn't dry or rot, and even the skin still maintained its elasticity. It's like it's still alive. One of them sighed. Actually, the higher-ups wanted to hand over the full authority of this matter to the Super Administrative Office, but no matter what, it's related to the situation in space, so they asked us to come and assist in the investigation. So you came all the way to Jiangjin to tell me this story that has nothing to do with our group? Su Feng listened patiently for a long time, but he realized that this matter didn't seem to have anything to do with him. Because 10 years ago, whether it was the launch site or the recovery site, the spacecraft was quite far from Jiangjin, and the wreckage was not preserved nearby, so he had no idea why these guys came to him. If that's the case, of course we wouldn't come to you. The guy who spoke was still the same guy. It seemed that his authority wasn't low, which made the other people look like a human background. We said before that we're looking for survivors. Wait, do you suspect that the person whose body didn't change is actually not dead, and the so-called body is just some kind of camouflage or a substitute? Su Feng's mind flashed. and he asked in disbelief. Although it's really unbelievable, when the astronaut's friend passed by Jiang Jin, he accidentally saw someone who looked exactly like the astronaut. This gave us a direction for the investigation, so we can't give up. The man said calmly, Team Leader Su, please understand and support us. Okay, I'll believe you for now. Because there was no conflict of interest with the other party's department, Su Feng frowned, but he didn't reject it too much. Then, tell me, how can I support your operation? The other party smiled and said, actually, this is not difficult, division line. In short, after the two little gray men calmed down, Su Xinxing asked for some information, Su Feng's information. First of all, these two guys were from the Zenith planet. Su Xinxing didn't know where the Zenith planet was. According to them, because they were admitted to an alien university, actually, it was more like a research institute, but Su Xinxing's translation system translated it to university. They went on an interstellar trip to celebrate. However, they inexplicably ended up near Earth. The spacecraft's engine accumulated a lot of static electricity and couldn't warp anymore. The spacecraft was captured by Earth's gravity, and it ran out of fuel. For the time being, it could only float in Earth's orbit, unable to escape. Fortunately, the cloaking system could still be used, so it didn't cause any big news, nor was it discovered by NASA or the MIB. When the little gray men were at a loss, a strange life form from Earth, probably, suddenly came to their door and told them that he had high-energy dust that could be used as fuel for the spaceship, but he needed to make some dirty deals to give it to them. After the little gray men examined the goods and weighed the pros and cons, they decided to cooperate with the guy. They used a tractor beam to steal the bronze cauldron from the Jiangjin Museum. The elevator was a temporary passage that the mysterious person proposed to build so that it could get on and off the spacecraft at any time and take the bronze cauldron. According to the agreement, it will send us the high-energy dust in 2 days, the little gray men said. The little gray man concluded with this sentence, but it has also taken away your ancient artifact. Originally, I wanted to tear down this passage in the afternoon, but I didn't expect you to jump out at this time. Su Xinxing sorted out the information he had at hand and found that the testimony of these aliens was very similar to what the Hobbit, the Gerona dwarves said. However, what attracted the Gerona dwarves was the fertile and stable new home, while what attracted the little gray men was the so-called high-energy dust. According to the law of Earth's technology being destroyed by alien technology, the guy who had the high-energy dust that the aliens needed was definitely not an Earthling. In addition, the passage to the spacecraft was built in the museum, which obviously further proved that the other party was hiding in the museum. Although Zhang Heng did not know how it managed to avoid being searched, in a sense, as long as it could avoid being searched, the museum was indeed the best place to carry out these little tricks. As the saying goes, the most dangerous place is the safest place, which is more or less the same as the saying goes, the darkest place under the light is the safest place. If Su Xinxing wanted to, he could stay here for 2 days and catch the other party when it came to pay the bill. But regardless of whether the other party would go back on their word, the fact that he had to stay in the white flying saucer for a few days without any entertainment was enough to kill him. Besides, Mo Li's physical condition was also worrying. Although it was not a big deal to go out for a short while, he would have to go back to replenish the girl's magic sooner or later. So, the best way was to find a way to catch the mastermind behind this as soon as possible. Meow, forget it. I'll use tonight as an opportunity to take care of the other party, although the other party might find some strange things to help steal the treasure, as long as it intended to take away the cultural relics, Su Xinxing would have a chance to catch it. And Su Xinxing vaguely felt that he might have already figured out who the culprit was. Please wait a minute, if you really catch that guy, we won't be able to leave here. The little gray man said with a gray face. Meow, does your spacecraft have equipment to store energy? Of course, if there is enough energy, we can directly jump to the vicinity of our home. But even if all the power plants on Earth were to supply us with electricity, it would take a long time to fully charge. The little gray man said with a gray face. Meow, take me to see it. So, the little gray man brought Su Shenxing to the so-called energy storage part. For some reason, Su Shenxing felt that the thing looked like a large pushpin. He poked the thing with his claws, and the little gray man who was monitoring the hull took a deep breath. It's fully charged in an instant. Unbelievable. Meow, why is it in English? Chapter 167. After Su Shenxing returned to Earth through the passage, the small red cabinet gradually disappeared. It seemed that the aliens had left. After wandering around the exhibition hall for a while, Su Shenxing could not find the three little girls. It seemed that when he ran into space, he was caught by the police and sent out of the museum. In order to better monitor the situation of the crime, Su Shenxing simply went under a table in the exhibition hall where the last exhibit was located and waited for the announcement to come. After a while, the mutation began. At first, Su Shenxing, like Xiao Zhengyi and the others, thought that the prisoner had used a spell like hypnosis to make the police lose the memory of the time when the crime was committed. But the truth was obviously not that simple. When Su Shenxing came to his senses, the time of the crime had already passed, and the statue of the Heavenly Lord of the beginning had disappeared. So that was it. If it was a mortal. No, even if it was a brilliant magician here, there was no way for him to figure out what the prisoner had done. But Su Shenxing could. It was not because his magic immune physique had an effect, but simply because he had experienced something similar before. Once, Su Shenxing had a close friend in a different world. In a battle, in order to save Su Shenxing, who was still a rookie at the time, his close friend had burned his own plate of life. This caused his body to become like a sieve, unable to retain his life force. He could only watch as it flowed away. In order to save his close friend, Su Shenxing chose to ask a powerful and temperamental witch for help. So, after the witch received the corresponding reward, she cut off the next 20 years of Su Shenxing's time, and used it to repair his plate of life, giving him 20 years of life. Because of the extremely deep impression, Su Shenxing could be sure that the feeling of his time being cut off at that time was almost exactly the same as the feeling just now. However, the cutting of time seemed to be limited to the museum, so Su Shenxing did not feel it before. Someone who could tamper with time could be regarded as a strong enemy even if it was limited by the area. After all, this kind of enemy belonged to the concept system, and if placed in the sword and magic world, it would be at the legendary level. Ever since he returned to Earth, he had not encountered an opponent of this level. Not only was Su Shenxing not afraid, but he was also eager to try. Whether it was time cut or time halt, other than the fact that he had yet to meet someone who could reverse time, it wasn't as if he had never fought an enemy who could play with time. Although Su Shenxing had turned into a cat, in a sense, his power had been limited to a certain extent. He should be able to last a little longer. Crawling out from under the table, he walked through the police officers who were panicking because of the disappearance of the exhibits and came to a person. It was Li Tenghua, who had been sitting silently at the side since the beginning. She seemed to be regretting it. Although others would probably think that she regretted not being able to protect it well, Su Shenxing knew that this was not the case. They looked at each other for a long time. Finally, Li Tenghua clapped her hands, and the noisy exhibition hall quieted down. It was not that the police officers were silent, but they were now like stone statues, fixed in place and motionless. Not only the police officers, but even the flies flying in the air were frozen. If the picture was not in color, it would give people the feeling that time had stopped. In fact, it was indeed a kind of time halt, but the other party only paused the time in the museum, and the time outside was still flowing normally. Although I don't know what you are, I advise you to know your place, and stay away from my daughters. Li Tenghua, the initiator of all this, warned Su Shenxing fiercely. Meow 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 meow. Su Shenxing retorted, not to be outdone. Speak human language. Who the hell are you? Su Shenxing, who only now realized that he could stop meowing, suddenly felt overjoyed, but he still tried to be serious and asked the other party. I don't need to explain to you. Then the second question, Su Shinxing did not care at all about the other party's rejection, but continued to ask, why did you encourage the Gerona dwarves and aliens to steal things? With your ability, it would be easier to do it yourself, right? Li Tenghua did not answer, but only sent a flying kick, but it was easily dodged by Su Shinxing. Last question. He continued to ask as he ran in circles, what do you want? But just like before, Li Tenghua still pursed her lips and did not answer a word, but only stared fiercely at Su Shinxing. Her non-violent and uncooperative attitude. Fine, actually she wanted to be violent, but Su Shinxing just dodged it. In short, her attitude made Su Shinxing come to a decision. Communication ability 0, violent temper, unknown origin, degree of danger. Slightly high. If that was the case, there was no need to be merciful. The next moment, a white light flashed, and Li Tenghua, who did not have time to react, had her right hand cut off at the shoulder, revealing the white bones. It fell to the ground with a thud. Strangely, her wound did not bleed at all. She really was not human. Su Shinxing waved his claws. Although he had hit the other party, his claws did not feel like he had hit a solid body. He locked his gaze on the other party's neck. And the other party did not look like she had a broken hand, neither did she shout, "Ah, my king's power," nor did she learn any unique skills like the overwhelming sadness palm. Since it was useless to just cut off an arm, he could only kill it. How did you find out that I did it? Suddenly, the other party took the initiative to speak to Su Shinxing. I didn't feel it before, just a little suspicious. But just now, I found that the strange aura on you was quite strong. You issued the criminal notice so that as a police officer, I would have a legitimate reason to enter the museum, right? Then you would have the opportunity to slowly deploy all the embezzlement in the museum. Based on the strength you showed just now, even if you had done a lot of research, you would still need a very complicated ritual arrangement. Such an obvious flaw, of course I would be able to see it. Su Shinxing did not hide it and said casually. At the same time, he stared at the other party maliciously. Then, as the price for my honest answer, can you tell me now what exactly do you want to do? Li Tenghua was silent for a few seconds, and the expression on her face was conflicted and distressed for a long time. Finally, she answered faintly. I just want to let myself come back to life, so that my children can freely bathe in the sun. At this point, her gaze suddenly became firm. For this, I will not hesitate. Chapter 168. Su Shinxing realized that he couldn't understand the meaning behind her words at all. What did she mean by, let my child bask in the sun? Could it be that the three sisters were vampires? But when he was with them, Su Shinxing didn't sense any supernatural powers from the girls. Then again, what Su Shinxing hated the most was this kind of person who didn't say anything and liked to be mysterious. If he hadn't received the kindness of the three sisters and felt embarrassed to kill their mother without understanding anything, Su Shinxing would have already killed her 7 or 8 times just based on this person's strange appearance in front of him and the time it took to talk to her, but even so, Su Shinxing's patience was reaching its limit. So he didn't continue to talk to her in a bureaucratic tone. Instead, he narrowed his bright yellow cat eyes and wagged his tail in annoyance. He said coldly, I'll give you 2 options now. One is to explain the situation to me in 300 words. 2 is to die. Don't think that I can't do anything to you just because you have this ability. The number of time ability users who have died by my hands is enough to form an idol group in the academy. I can't feel the feeling of death anymore. Li Tenghua's shoulder blade trembled, and the arm that was originally cut off at the shoulder reappeared. She snorted coldly and mockingly, but before she could finish, Su Shinxing's claws cut her waist in 2. And unlike the usual physical attacks before, this time his claws were covered with a layer of cloud scales, enough to cause considerable damage to some supernatural creatures who could ignore physical attacks. Not only that, but because of the cloud scales attached to the wound, unless Su Shinxing retracted them, it wouldn't be able to heal or regenerate. This was also why Su Shenxing couldn't summon the holy sword in his cat form, but he was still not afraid of time ability users. Obviously, his actions had worked. Li Tenghua let out a heart-wrenching scream and fell to the ground, looking at herself in disbelief as she was cut in two. Although I don't know what you are, it seems like it won't be difficult to kill you. As he spoke, Su Shenxing's furry cat claws were already on Li Tenghua's head. As long as he exerted a little force, he would be able to crush Li Tenghua's head through the cloud scales. Wait, I surrender. Before Su Shenxing could make a move, he finally realized that the person he was dealing with might be a vicious and merciless guy. The other party no longer looked as confident as before. Instead, he begged for mercy in a very sorry state. Su Shenxing originally wanted to kill her directly, but after a moment of consideration, he decided to listen to her explanation first. Anyway, at the very least, he could treat it as a story, dividing line. Li Tenghua's original name wasn't Li Tenghua, but after reincarnating, she had almost forgotten her name in her previous life. Right now, she could only vaguely remember that she was in the aerospace industry in her previous life. After she died in a space accident, her soul didn't enter the underworld. Instead, it floated to the moon. Then, on the far side of the moon, she found strange instruments and several corpses of humanoid creatures with 3 eyes. After tinkering in that area for a relatively long time, Li Tenghua's soul was exposed to the strange rays emitted by those instruments. In the end, she ended up in her current strange state, and without anyone teaching her, she learned the knowledge of the original owners of those corpses who claimed to be Jiuli citizens. After that, Li Tenghua flew back to Earth and reincarnated into a woman named Li Tenghua. Of course, this was not the climax of the story. The climax was that Li Tenghua, who borrowed another person's body, finally gave birth to 3 children for an authentic human. This was no longer a problem of different species, but even the matter was different. Reproductive isolation and so on, just watch. Li Tenghua loved her daughters very much, but unfortunately, because of physical problems, the girls had some congenital defects. As the result of the love between a human and a half-ghost, it was already very good that they didn't die halfway. Although the 3 sisters survived, their defects didn't disappear. In fact, as a place where a human and a ghost were born, the physical condition of the 3 sisters was worrying from the beginning. They couldn't stay in the sun for too long, they couldn't be blown by too much wind, some of the human food was not practical, and even if they paid attention to everything, they were destined to die early. The reason for this was very simple, because part of their souls was similar to that of a ghost, which was exposed to the outside of their bodies. Because of this, Li Tenghua took the risk of being discovered and specially set up a trap to steal what she needed. The pottery bowl seemed to be the first food utensil of human in the Neolithic age, which had the meaning of new life. Using it to store medicine could make the medicine achieve the best effect. The Taoist bronze cauldron was actually a variant of the alchemy furnace, but later on, the special alchemy technique was lost, so it was used as a utensil to store medicine. Finally, there was nothing special about the statue of Heavenly Lord Yuanshi itself. The real important thing was the 3 gems jade rui in the statue's hand. That thing was carved out of a very special ancient jade fragment. With it as the main material, through the unique alchemy technique of the people of Jiuli, they could refine a very special medicine. Its specific name was something that couldn't be verified even in the memory of the people of Jiuli. If mortals took it, they could be reborn. If evil ghosts used it, their souls could condense into a new body, which was really amazing. Although there was definitely a difference between a body mainly made of jade and a real human body, it was much better than exposing the soul. When the topic began to move the novel closer to the direction of a cultivation novel, Su Shenxing wisely stopped Li Tenghua from continuing to talk about it. In short, this farce was purely made up by this guy to help his daughters reconstruct their bodies. Although it was a little big, as a supernatural creature, it didn't belong to the unforgivable type. What's more, Su Shenxing also owed a debt of gratitude to his 3 daughters. Since everything was for their sake, he naturally didn't need to stop him. Anyway, he already got the three things, so Li Tenghua should be able to live a peaceful life and honestly live a normal life. Thinking of this, Su Xinxing retracted his paw and sighed. Later, you can resign by yourself. Take the blame for this matter that you made, and this matter will be over. He glanced at Li Tenghua. In the future, behave yourself, okay? If you bump into me again, you'll be in trouble. You're letting me go just like that? Originally, Li Tenghua had already prepared for the worst, but she didn't expect Su Xinxing to let it go so easily. Nonsense, do you want me to ask you to stay for dinner? Su Xinxing turned around and planned to leave the museum. However, at this time, a stern voice came from the door. You can't let the prisoner go without permission. Chapter 169. The first time Luo Zhizhen saw her was at the National Astronaut Scientific Research and Training Center. At that time, the girl was climbing on the persimmon tree behind the courtyard. She carefully tiptoed, trying to pick the green persimmons that didn't look completely ripe. As a member of the Abnormal Events Management Office, it was the first time Luo Zhizhen saw such an interesting girl in such a serious place. Although his unit was subordinate to the Super Administrative Office, because the matters he dealt with were biased towards aerospace, he dealt with the National Space Administration more often than the Super Administrative Office. It was precisely because he was used to the group of old-fashioned people in the training center that when he suddenly saw such a lively girl, she immediately left a deep impression on Luo Zhizhen. To put it more exaggeratedly, it was as if the whole world suddenly lit up and became a beautiful picture scroll. People below, get out of the way. However, beautiful things didn't last long. Luo Zhizhen, who was in a daze, didn't react in time. He was hit by a butt that fell from the sky and became a human cushion. He was sent to the infirmary because of a nosebleed. This was the first encounter between the two that wasn't romantic at all. After that, Luo Zhizhen found out that the girl was also a department member of the Astronaut Scientific Research and Training Center. Because of her excellent grades in school, she interned here in advance. Although the Astronaut Scientific Research and Training Center was not as strict as the military, because some projects involved state secrets, the personal freedom of the people who worked here was more or less affected. Because of this reason, although the girl was young and had no contact with the astronauts, she could only spend her youth with a group of old men and women. In this case, it was normal for her to have some sparks with Luo Zhizhen, who often came to the Astronaut Scientific Research and Training Center. He was good-looking and had a good personality. With the impact of their first meeting, the relationship between the two quickly became closer. In the beginning, when Luo Zhizhen occasionally went to the training center, he would bring some cakes, cookies, donuts, and other inconvenient desserts as gifts for the girl. And the girl who received the gift was embarrassed to eat it for free. So when Luo Zhizhen came here, she would cook something for Luo Zhizhen for lunch or dinner. Over time, what started out as a normal meal gradually turned into a scene where the two of them flaunted their love for each other. Whether it was Luo Zhizhen's colleagues or other people in the training center, they could only tactfully retreat to prevent themselves from being blinded by the flash. On the grass field in the training center's courtyard, the two of them sat side by side, eating sandwiches made by the girl herself. The girl pretended to sigh in dissatisfaction and complained, "Sigh, why did I board your pirate ship for no reason?" Due to the confidentiality agreement, Luo Zhizhen didn't tell the girl his real job. However, the girl vaguely felt that his job wasn't ordinary. Or rather, the fact that he could freely enter and leave a place like the Astronaut Scientific Research and Training Center was already extraordinary. Probably because I'm more outstanding. When Luo Zhizhen was young, he still had the sense of superiority that was unique to government personnel. He grinned at the girl, not noticing that there were pieces of seaweed stuck to his teeth. "I'm not bragging, but when I was in school, I was the most handsome guy in the school. The love letters I received every day were thicker than the textbooks." The girl naturally looked at him coldly. Yes, so our Mr. Luo should find other rich and beautiful women with better conditions to reach the pinnacle of life. Don't worry about a research dog like me who doesn't know how to dress like a country bumpkin. After that, The girl who finished her lunch brushed off the crumbs on her white lab coat. She was about to leave when Luo Zhizhen grabbed her hand. He smiled and said some words of love. If you can stand at the door and wait for me, then behind you is the pinnacle of my life. Shameless bastard. Wait, you seem to have misunderstood something. Well, even though the occasional small quarrel was inevitable, the relationship between the two was gradually warming up. After about 2 years of dating, they finally reached the point where they were about to talk about marriage. However, someone from the China National Space Administration suddenly found the girl. They hoped that the girl, as a research specialist, would be an astronaut in the latest manned space flight. They wanted her to complete an experiment in space that ordinary astronauts couldn't complete. Also, because this experiment was sensitive, this space mission wouldn't be announced to the public. Because this kind of mission had a certain degree of risk, participation wasn't mandatory. When Luo Zhizhen found out about this, the girl had already thought about it carefully and agreed to participate in the mission. Because of this, the two had a big fight. They even said things like breaking up. However, when the rocket was about to be launched, Luo Zhizhen still went to the site. Humph, if you don't come, you'll be dead when I come back. After seeing him, the girl wiped her tears and said stubbornly. Luo Zhizhen just hugged the girl. Well, because he was wearing a spacesuit, it felt special. He didn't defend himself, nor did he apologize or refute. He just gently whispered in the girl's ear, the persimmons in the training center are ripe again. When you come back, let's go pick them together. I'll climb the tree this time. The girl paused for a second, then her expression softened. She wiped the tears on her face and nodded with a smile. Obviously, people in that era didn't know what a flag was. So when the spacecraft entered Earth's orbit, because of a mechanical failure, the cabin suddenly lost pressure. Even though they had emergency treatment training, because of the serious engineering error, the 3 astronauts, including the girl, could only wear their spacesuits and quietly wait for the oxygen to run out. Luo Zhizhen, who was full of anticipation, saw the girl's cold body after the spacecraft was recovered. There was a recording pen in the spacesuit, and the people from the space agency had copied the recording that the girl had specially given to Luo Zhizhen. The girl's familiar voice revealed her fear in the face of death, and it made his heart ache even more. It was probably from then on that Luo Zhizhen never liked another woman. Well, of course, he didn't like men. After discovering that there was something wrong with the girl's body, he took advantage of his position and transferred it to the Extraterrestrial Abnormal Events Management Office's vault. Then, he climbed up in the system step by step, in order to raise the girl's body to the highest level of priority. About 10 years passed like this. Then, in the museum in Jiangjin City, he saw the figure of his dreams again. Although there were some changes in her appearance, he believed that he would never mistake her for someone else. She was the girl from back then, his one and only lover. Hence, when he saw that the black cat seemed to be planning to let the woman leave, he lost all of his usual calmness and shouted out subconsciously, "You can't let a criminal go without permission." Chapter 170. Speaking of which. Luo Zhizhen pointed at the black cat on the ground and turned back to ask Su Feng, "This guy spoke just now, right? This is already under your jurisdiction, right? Aren't you going to arrest it?" Su Feng, who had already learned about Su Xinxing's tragic experience from Xiao Zhengyi's report, obviously wouldn't go looking for trouble. Of course not, he just shrugged. In our line of work, the most important thing is to act according to our ability. I can't beat it. Luo Zhizhen was a little surprised by this. Although Su Feng was currently sent to Jiangjin as a local commissioner, Luo Zhizhen knew that this guy wasn't a big deal. On the contrary, he was one of the most powerful people in the super administrative office. He was once the director of a special high-risk shelter in the Celestial Empire. If it weren't for some political considerations, he wouldn't have been sent to this place. The black cat that even he admitted that he wasn't a match for. Could it be a big monster from ancient times? But these weren't factors that Luo Zhizhen needed to consider. Suspect over there, I'm now arresting you for theft and intentional destruction of cultural relics. He walked toward Li Tenghua with a strong sense of righteousness. Li Tenghua frowned and clapped her hands. Suddenly, the strange silence that shrouded the museum disappeared. The statue-like police officers moved again and immediately noticed Su Feng and Luo Zhizhen, who suddenly appeared in the museum, and surrounded them. You can't be thinking that these ordinary people can do anything to us, right? Luo Zhizhen wasn't a superhuman, but when he came into contact with aliens, the Celestial Empire's Abnormal Events Management Department also obtained some alien technology. There were even a lot of alien technology products, many of which were allocated to the members of the Abnormal Events Management Department, who acted more like special agents than the police. As the director, Luo Zhizhen was fully equipped. Putting aside the alien species, if it were ordinary people, they wouldn't be able to do anything to him without hundreds of fully armed and highly trained soldiers. Li Tenghua didn't answer. She just clapped her hands again, and the time in the entire space stopped again. This time, not only the police, even Su Feng and Luo Zhizhen became like statues. Only Su Xinxing was still unaffected. After experiencing this situation twice in a row, Su Xinxing could see the nature of this woman's ability. Strictly speaking, Li Tenghua didn't really have the ability to stop time. Her ability was closer to cutting and pasting time. Under certain conditions, she could cut a part of the time in a specific area. This would cause a certain degree of space-time discontinuity, but because it wouldn't happen in a large area, it wouldn't affect the stability of the world structure. The time tssssssss. It's. Twos. After s-twos, s's, it's, the s was s, this too. S. And during the time that was cut off, the other people's state was almost as if time had stopped. Similarly, because this ability was limited to an area, when Su Feng and Luo Zhizhen entered the museum from the outside, they happened to be in the time that was cut. Therefore, they were not affected by the ability. Therefore, Li Tenghua cut the remaining time again and let the flow of time return to normal. Then, she pasted it again, causing the two newcomers to fall into a similar state of time freeze. So that's how it is. The time that was cut off is kept in your soul, but the priority of the time is very high, and the burden on your soul is considerable. In addition, you are the type of person who reincarnates in another body, so the compatibility between the soul and the body is not high. If this continues, you will soon die again. Su Xinxing narrowed his eyes and saw through the woman's current state. As expected, my power is still unable to affect you. Li Tenghua could not help but sigh when she saw that the black cat was still alive and kicking. Although she tried her best to hide it, Su Xinxing could see that she was at the end of her tether. The elixir that you plan to refine, is it useful for you? Su Xinxing thought of the elixir that the woman mentioned before. It is useful, but to be honest, I don't have much time left, and the refining time of that kind of elixir is very long. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in such a hurry. I plan to ask the alchemists of this era to refine the elixir for my daughters. If I use the lost alchemy technique of the Jiuli tribe as a bargaining chip, they should be very happy. Li Tenghua revealed her plan with a bitter smile, and then asked seriously, but my husband can't take good care of my daughters because of work. When the time comes, can you help me take care of them? Li Tenghua, who did not know that Su Xinxing's real identity was a Lelican uncle, sincerely sold her daughters. Of course, as the protagonist, Su Xinxing was not the kind of person who would take advantage of others' difficulties. Moreover, he, who lost his mother when he was young, knew very well how difficult it was for children to live in a single-parent family, and how much impact it would have on children. Therefore, Su Xinxing tried hard to think of a solution. If Mo Li's seal was unlocked to the third stage, it shouldn't be a problem to pause time and slowly refine the elixir. Because it was a universal time pause, there wouldn't be any space-time discontinuities, so the safety factor was very high. The only problem was that when the seal was unlocked to the third stage, Mo Li would be in danger of going berserk. Although there was Su Shenxing, and the safety of the Milky Way should not be a problem, if he accidentally used too much force, it would be a matter of seconds for him to blow up the Earth. Even Su Shenxing was not 100% sure that he could stop it. Forget it, it was not worth it to gamble on Earth for a half-human half-ghost. In short, Su Shenxing tapped Li Tenghua with his cat paw, "Give me your phone, and the guy over there, stop pretending." Su Feng, who was still maintaining the posture of a flying noodle god, immediately returned to his normal standing posture. He scratched his head a little awkwardly. "Was I discovered?" "From the beginning." "Speaking of which, I can't believe you can do that kind of action." Leaving aside Li Tenghua, who was surprised that there was someone other than Su Shenxing who was immune to her ability, Su Shenxing began to tap on the phone after he got it. However, because of the cat paw, it was very difficult to operate the touchscreen phone, and to the onlookers, it looked like a kitten playing with the phone. After realizing this, Su Shenxing stopped messing around and waved his paw at Su Feng. "Help me make a call." "Who is it?" Su Feng thought for a while, then took out his phone. "At this time, why don't you ask Magical Xingyan?" Chapter 171. Of course there is a way, but I'm not too sure about the specific method. I may have to go back to the Bailu Temple to look for related ancient books. Qin Xingyan's voice came from the phone with the loudspeaker turned on. After Su Shenxing explained the cause and effect to her, the girl was silent for a few seconds as if she was thinking about something. Then, she gave a definite answer. Su Shenxing could only sigh in his heart, as expected of Xingyan a dream. Although Sakura apartment was currently the weakest, in terms of knowledge, there was no doubt that this chief disciple of the Bailu Temple was the best in the entire Sakura apartment. But obviously, Li Tenghua did not think so. "Little girl over there, although I don't know anything about the Bailu Temple, the alchemy method of the people of Jiuli is different from that of ordinary Taoism. If you think that the method that is effective for alchemy is also effective for the people of Jiuli, then I'm afraid you're wrong. Speaking of which, what exactly is the so-called people of Jiuli?" Su Feng asked curiously. Although Li Tenghua had mentioned similar words several times, there was no specific explanation. He only knew that the bodies of the two three-eyed people on the back of the moon seemed to be related to the people of Jiuli. "Actually, I'm not too sure about the details." Li Tenghua smiled bitterly and shook her head. "In my memory, the description of the people of Jiuli is only a general impression of losers living in the gray world. But combined with other memories, I guess they are very likely to be similar to humans, but their technology tree has completely deviated to the other side. Compared to natural physical science, they are more inclined to the mysterious alien creatures of the cultivation world." "You heard it too. Even so, is there still a way?" Su Shenxing continued to ask the phone. To be honest, even Su Shenxing felt that it was a little difficult. After all, Li Tenghua's description of the technology of the people of Jiuli was vague, and he did not know what the so-called alchemy method of the other party was. Under the circumstances where the known conditions were very limited, it was indeed very difficult to come up with a solution. "Huh. I've never said that my method is to speed up the alchemy process, right?" However, Qin Xingyan on the phone sounded a little surprised. "Not to speed up the alchemy process? What method is that?" Li Tenghua's eyes widened in disbelief. Soon after, she immediately realized that she seemed to have fallen into some kind of misunderstanding because she was too anxious for success these days. Why did she have to rely on medicinal pills to solve the predicament that she and her daughter were in? "After listening to your description of your current symptoms, I feel that it's very similar to a special ethnic group on the other side of the river of forgetfulness. I'm not sure if you've heard of them before, but I remember that their name seems to be..." Qin Xingyan paused, as if he was trying hard to recall something. "Oh right, they're called half-human, half-spirit." "Half-human and half-spirit? Is there such a monster?" Su Feng, who was listening by the side, could not help but frown. Since the establishment of the Super Administrative Office, they had encountered hundreds of thousands of supernatural incidents. Almost all supernatural creatures were recorded, but as far as Su Feng knew, the agents of the Super Administrative Office had never encountered a half-human, half-spirit existence. No, you've definitely heard of the half-human half-spirit. Impossible, I'm quite confident in my memory in this regard. Su Feng shook his head and said proudly. According to the records in that ancient book, the world's first half-human, half-spirit was called Mengpa. What? Not only Su Feng, but even Su Xinxing was shocked. Even he, an ordinary person who had never been involved in the cultivation world, had heard of the legend of Meng Po's soup. It would be strange if there was someone in the Celestial Empire who did not know about Meng Po. It is said that Meng Po's real body is the legendary Meng Jiangnu. Meng Po's soup was originally brewed by her to make herself forget the pain of losing her husband. Later, Yan Jun took a fancy to her ability to brew Meng Po's soup, so he took out a part of her soul and turned it into a half-spirit, so that she could walk in the underworld with a living body and have a longer lifespan. By the way, it is also recorded in that book that most humans do not need to drink Meng Po's soup after death. As long as they pass through the river of forgetfulness, they will forget their past and reincarnate again. Only those souls with particularly heavy karma need to drink Meng Po's soup to wash away their karma. How should I put it? It feels a bit fake. Su Xinxing lay on the ground and rolled around like a real cat, which was a sign of his distress. Reincarnation and whatnot have already happened. However, if there is really such a thing as a half-human half-spirit, then Miss Qin's proposal is indeed worth a try. Su Feng also thought for a moment, then spread out his hands and said, at least refining pills with a lower success rate is worth a try. Even the person involved, Li Tenghua, fell silent. No one knew what she was thinking with her head down. Of course, there are still some problems with this proposal. Otherwise, I would not have gone back to the Bailu Temple to look for that book. What problems? Just when Su Xinxing thought that everything was fine, Qin Xingyan suddenly poured cold water on his face, so he could only helplessly ask. The soul can be considered the most solid object in the world. It is invisible and immaterial, difficult to touch, let alone cut it accurately. As far as I know, the cases that can cause damage to the soul in recent times are all cases where the soul of the other party is directly destroyed, not cut it. The latter is much more difficult than the former. After a pause, the girl continued, Senior Su, your power is indeed very strong, but I believe you know that if you use your power, which requires the word physical, there is no doubt that you will destroy the soul of the other person. If you want to cut the soul, you have to find an artifact that can cut the soul without damaging the core. Suddenly, the difficulty was raised to another level. Don't worry, I will refer to the method recorded in the book and optimize it. Then, I will do my best to help you. Oh, as expected of the trustworthy Xingyan a dream, then I will have to trouble you. Su Xinxing immediately jumped up and was not stingy with his words of praise. So, Qin Xingyan muttered to himself, so, can the saying Xingyan a dream be changed, and hung up the phone. The exhibition hall was suddenly filled with a cheerful atmosphere. Originally, after Qin Xingyan found what he wanted and helped Li Tenghua solve her current problem, this matter was almost over. As for Luo Zhizhen and Li Tenghua's long story, Su Xinxing had no interest in getting involved. However, at this moment, a small figure suddenly ran in from outside. Mom, bad news. And Wenhua's little face was full of panic and worry as she ran towards Li Tenghua, sister. Xinghua suddenly fainted. Chapter 172. Hearing that something had happened to her daughter, Li Tenghua immediately took the lead and ran out. Su Xinxing and Su Feng looked at each other and then followed her. As for Luo Zhizhen and the others who were still like statues. Anyway, according to Li Tenghua, as long as she waited for the time she cut to run out, the time flow in the museum would be restored. There should be no problem. Soon, the group of people saw Xinghua lying on the bench by the roadside and Barry-Hua anxiously running around in circles. What happened? What happened to Xinghua? Li Tenghua asked anxiously. We don't know. Just when we were about to go back, my sister suddenly fainted. Barry Hua was at a loss as to what to do. Su Feng put his right hand on the girl's forehead and closed his eyes to check on the girl. Then, he let go of his hand and comforted Li Tenghua, "It's okay. Although I don't know why she fainted, your daughter's body is very healthy now. There's nothing wrong with her." Su Shenxing, who still didn't show any signs of returning to his human form, jumped from the ground to the bench. He looked at the little girl with some doubts in his heart. Just as Su Feng said, there was nothing obviously wrong with the girl's body. There was neither a curse aura nor visible external injuries. There was also no death aura unique to people who were seriously ill. But for some reason, Su Shenxing felt that there seemed to be a strange change in the girl's body, and that change gave him a vague sense of familiarity. Li Tenghua didn't have enough confidence in Su Feng's judgment. In the end, she decided to send the girl to the hospital for a good check. But at this time, Xinghua woke up faintly by herself. "Xinghua, how are you?" Li Tenghua immediately went to her in surprise and asked anxiously. "I'm okay, Mom. I'm just a little dizzy." The girl, who seemed to be a little dizzy, said slowly in a low voice. "It's good that you're okay, it's good that you're okay." Li Tenghua hugged Xinghua. Although she looked like she was crying, everyone could feel that she was actually relieved. After confirming that Xinghua was fine, this incident was about to come to an end. Since Su Shenxing had decided to let bygones be bygones, and Li Tenghua had also decided to pay for the stolen antiques in installments to compensate the city museum, Su Feng had no intention of holding on to it. He was flexible enough. However, just as everyone was about to disperse like this, and Su Shenxing was about to head over to Su Feng's place to make him pay for yesterday's debt, Xinghua curiously asked Li Tenghua, "Mom, why isn't sesame paste coming over?" "Well, it's because it found its new master." Li Tenghua was stunned for a moment. Only then did she remember the terrifying Xiao Hei cat. In order to prevent her daughter from being harmed by the cat's poisonous fangs, she tried to coax her in a pleasant manner. As a result, Apricot Flower burst into tears. The eldest sister, Wenhua, and the second sister, Meihua, were also affected by their younger sister's cries. Okay, I'll go look for it. Mom will go look for it for you," because she was afraid that Xinghua would be too agitated and faint again. Li Tenghua could only agree to her request. Then, she planned to catch a suitable black cat to complete her task. Unexpectedly, after hearing what she said, Xinghua immediately jumped down from the bench. Then, as if nothing had happened, she ran behind Su Shenxing and picked up Su Shenxing, who had an annoyed expression on his face. "Wait a minute, that cat." Li Tenghua was shocked by her younger daughter's reckless behavior. She was afraid that Su Shenxing would suddenly jump out in a rage and shout, "There's a gay guy pulling my zipper," and knock down everyone present. However, what she didn't expect was that although Su Shenxing's expression was very dissatisfied, there were no signs of him exploding. Could it be that this guy's tolerance towards children is higher? Li Tenghua guessed in her heart. After sending the 3 children and the cat home, Li Tenghua was asked by Su Feng to make a statement. Even if Su Feng didn't intend to arrest Li Tenghua, the record was still needed. As for Apricot, because she had just fainted, Li Tenghua forcefully stuffed her under the blanket before she left. She could only watch the other 2 girls play around in the living room. Lying in the silent bedroom, the girl's eyes stared straight at the door, as if waiting for something. After a while, the bedroom door opened by itself. Su Shenxing squeezed in through the crack in the door, then jumped onto the bed and looked at the girl. "What are you?" After a while, Su Shenxing asked curiously, "Although you're trying hard to pretend that nothing happened, I can feel that you seem to have changed somewhere. Well, although I have a lot to say, before that, Teacher Su, I think it's better for you to go to Crimson Heaven Mountain as soon as possible." Because there was only her and Su Shenxing in the room, cat, the girl didn't have the naivety of a child like before. Instead, she spoke seriously like a little adult. "Why?" Naturally, Su Shenxing was a little confused by her inexplicable suggestion. He could only stare at the girl with the unique sharp eyes of a cat and ask. Crimson Heaven's Mountain was where the White Deer Monastery was located. Although Su Yangyi's reputation in the White Deer Monastery should be friendly, the other monsters who also resided in Crimson Heaven's Mountain were different. Apart from Grandmaster Mapleleaf, who had long since seen through everything, all the other monsters viewed Su Shenxing as an enemy. In order to maintain the delicate and stable relationship between humans and monsters in the Bailu Temple, it was better for Su Shenxing not to appear. Although you may not believe it, if you don't go now, that anti-Qin Xingyan might die. Xinghua didn't feel scared by Su Shenxing's sharp eyes. Instead, she answered seriously and seriously. Are you kidding? Su Shenxing really didn't believe the girl's words. No matter what, Crimson Heaven Mountain was the headquarters of the Bailu Temple, and Qin Xingyan was the eldest disciple of the Bailu Temple. How could something happen to her there? Moreover, although Qin Xingyan was considered weak in the Sakura apartment, in the outside world of cultivation, she was also a rare genius. Her skills could also be considered amazing. How could she be so easily harmed? I knew it wouldn't be that easy to make you believe me. In that case, the girl sighed helplessly. However, because she looked like a child, this kind of adult action was not only very strange, but also very cute. But soon after, her expression became solemn and respectful. Soon after, a white, cake-like thing appeared beside her. Not only that, but at the same time, there was also a shining golden sword that was too big for Xinghua. Su Shenxing recognized that sword. No, it should be said that it was one of the 12 holy swords that Su Shenxing had once collected. Shining holy sword, Harakti, then let me introduce myself again. Although my appearance hasn't changed, my soul has indeed changed. I am now in Xinghua 10 years from now, the only student of the future teacher Su Shenxing. Chapter 173. Although it was hard to believe, Su Shenxing had to admit that what Xinghua said was probably true because of the existence of the Holy Sword of Halakti. After all, the 12 holy swords he collected in the world of Auravia were unique existences, and now their combination, the Holy Sword of the End, Rolander, was also with him, although he could not summon it in cat form. Unless it was brought over from another time and space, it was theoretically impossible for a second Holy Sword of the End to appear. Can you tell me more about it? How did you come back to this era, and what is your purpose? Even so, Su Shenxing could not accept the fact that the other party came from the future so readily. Other things aside, at least he had to ask the necessary questions clearly. The person who sent me back is you, my future teacher. The girl did not beat around the bush, but answered his question openly. According to her, in the original timeline, Qin Xingyan would have been killed when he returned to the Bailu Temple to look for books related to half-human, half-spirit. Su Shenxing in that timeline regretted and suffered because of this. He felt that his commission had caused the death of Qin Xingyan, so he spent nearly 10 years learning the ability to cut open the timeline and sent his disciple, Xinghua, back to this era. Ah, by the way, it only took you about half a year to cut open the timeline, but because the universe since the Big Bang, the existing timeline is too long, it took you, my future teacher, more than 9 years to locate a rough time point in it. Wait a minute, if I could cut open the timeline, I would usually come here myself, right? Su Shenxing interrupted and asked. Although it was not something to be proud of, Su Shenxing generally would not ask others to help him with things that he could do. This was also a somewhat awkward character that he had developed after his parents divorced and he grew up alone. Because even if you cut open the timeline, ordinary people can't travel through time, and you, as a magic idiot, are no exception. The girl seemed to have expected that Su Shenxing would ask this question, and she replied with a smile, because my mother has a certain degree of ability to manipulate time, I also inherited the corresponding affinity with the concept of time. With the protection of your holy sword, as the reference point and singularity point in the two times, I can travel through the timeline and return to this era. Ordinary people can't travel through time, Su Shenxing muttered a little strangely. He once talked to Wu Yejin and knew that she had run back to the mythological era of Fusang with the help of the debate genius, and turned the world upside down with him a few years ago. He also had memories of that event. Although it was not even in the top 5 of his adventures, and he spent the whole event as relaxed and happy as if he was on vacation, but because the local conditions and customs were relatively special, his impression was still quite clear. Even after several years, he still recognized Wu Yejin when he saw her. Yes, even if ordinary people really go back to the past for some reason, everything they do will become part of history. There will be no change in the past, and it will not affect history. But I want to change the past and create a new future. For this, no matter what will happen, I have already prepared myself for it. The girl nodded and said with certainty. Another thing worth mentioning is that my future teacher wanted me to warn my current teacher that time and space are connected, and that both of them are very fragile in this world. Unless it's absolutely necessary, don't try to cut open the timeline. This will cause too much damage to the world itself. In that timeline, my teacher has only cut open the timeline 5 times, but even so, time and space have already become chaotic, and even dinosaurs have come out. If this continues, perhaps time will become a mess, and the entire world will be destroyed. In that case, even if my teacher is an idiot in magic, you should be able to understand what I'm saying, right? I'm a magic idiot, I'm sorry. Su Xinxing's mouth twitched a few times, and his cat whiskers trembled with his movements. He was a little depressed as he lay on the bed and asked weakly, then what happened to Qin Xingyan? Why was she killed? I don't know. So straightforward. You don't know the most important part, hey. Didn't you come back for this? Because the future teacher doesn't know either, the girl's shoulders drooped, and she answered rather confidently, at that time, you learned from the Bailu temple that Auntie Xingyan died in the hands of demons, so you were burning with anger at that time, and you vented your anger on the entire demon clan of Crimson Clouds Mountain. After that, not a single demon in the entire mountain range survived. Even the top of the mountain was lowered by about a meter because of your anger. Not to mention the monsters, even the animals that were hibernating were scared awake and fled Mount Danxia in a hurry. It was even reported by the media as the influence of the El Nino phenomenon. In short, without the person involved, you naturally have no way to know the cause and effect. The girl said it in a methodical manner, and it did not seem like she was making it up. And even if what she said was not true, for Qin Xingyan's safety, Su Xinxing could only go to Crimson Clouds Mountain personally, just in case. But before that, there was one more thing that he had to trouble Xinghua with. Use the shining holy sword to bring me back to Sakura apartment. I'll go find Mo Li to change back into my original form. I feel a little weird looking like this, teacher. I think your current form is actually just right. The girl liked Su Xinxing's cat form very much. If you go to Crimson Clouds Mountain in this form, even if you meet the demons, you won't be discovered, right? Oh, indeed, he believed that the demons on Crimson Clouds Mountain would never guess that such a small black cat was the person who defeated all of them back then. Although he wasn't afraid of those chi, he would try his best to avoid trouble if he could. Thinking about it this way, perhaps his current form was indeed more convenient. After all, Crimson Clouds Mountain was in China. Even if he turned into a cat, as long as he ran seriously, he should be able to make it in 10 minutes, or rather, if his goal was in China, no matter where he was, 10 minutes should be enough. The only thing he had to worry about was whether running too fast would cause strange things like typhoons. As long as he moved quickly, he should be able to make it back before dinner. Chapter 174. The Zhejiang Mountain Road was a national highway that ran through the entire Zhejiang, winding through the mountains. Because there were few people along the way and the road was long, there were all kinds of curves and straight lines. Therefore, even though there were many warning signs that said, accident-prone area, there were still many drivers who would speed here. Occasionally, there would even be illegal underground races held here. Although there weren't any races held recently, at this time, a silver-gray convertible Porsche was speeding along the road. The roar of the turbine engine made people's adrenaline rush, and the oncoming wind didn't blow away the happy expression of the two people in the car. This is my dad's new car. Normal people can't even see it in the Celestial Empire. Look, it's so fast. The man driving the steel beast was about 20 years old. He was showing off to the gorgeously dressed woman in the passenger seat with a proud face. As expected of Mr. Wang, you're different from the common people. I'm so happy, the woman immediately flattered him with a face full of admiration. Ha, I'm not bragging. Let me tell you, in the market right now, there aren't many cars that can surpass my Porsche in speed. In 2 days, I'll find 2 brothers to hold a race and you'll understand. When the time comes, you can bet on me winning. I don't know how much, but it's not a problem to make a few million. Being flattered like this, the waiter with the surname Wang became even more proud. At this time, he saw a black shadow slowly approaching him from behind in the rearview mirror. He instinctively thought it was another car and stepped on the gas. The roar of the turbine engine became even louder, and the steel beast named Porsche's speed increased by another level. This caught the woman off guard and she screamed, but the waiter laughed because he got rid of the other party. However, he didn't get to be proud for long before he suddenly realized that not only did the black shadow not disappear, but it seemed to be getting closer to him. And it didn't seem to be a sports car because the shadow was too small. If he looked closely, it felt like a little girl riding on the back of a black cat that was even smaller than her. No, it must be because I've been having too many affairs recently. I'm a little tired, so I'm having such an illusion. Therefore, he shook his head and tried his best to maintain his speed. Instead of looking at the rearview mirror, he risked turning his head back to take a look. The little girl riding the black cat was getting closer to him. He was completely dumbfounded by this unexpected situation. What's wrong, dear? The woman who was good at reading people's expressions immediately noticed that something was wrong and asked with concern. Look behind us. Is there something chasing after us? Even though he was covered in cold sweat, the waiter pretended to be calm and ordered. The woman turned her head in confusion, but she didn't turn her head back even after waiting for a while. After a while, she said in disbelief, "There's a cat is following our car." This caused little fool to tremble all over. It seemed that he wasn't the only one who could see that thing. But the woman didn't finish her. And that cat's left ear is shaking non-stop. It wants to overtake. WTF. This made the waiter tremble even more. In the blink of an eye, at a bend not far ahead, the black cat leaned against the drainage ditch and drifted away, leaving them behind. The impact of this scene was so great that the waiter accidentally drove his Porsche into the gutter on the side of the road. Fortunately, only the car was scrapped and the two of them were fine. As for how they were going to leave the gutter and return to human society, it had nothing to do with the speeding Su Xinxing. I suddenly found a problem. Su Xinxing said to Xinghua on his back. What problem? Xinghua, who was using her arms to tightly wrap around Su Xinxing's neck and trying not to be thrown off, asked. I remember Qin Xingyan once said that it would take a day and a night for her to go back and forth from Jiangjin to the Bailu Temple. In other words, including the rest time, it would take at least 10 hours each way, right? Is that so? Xinghua obviously didn't know Qin Xingyan's flying speed, but she didn't doubt Su Xinxing's words. She was a little confused and distressed, so we're early. Even if Su Xinxing took care of the girl on his back and didn't use the long-lost cat high-speed train to reach Crimson Cloud Mountain in 5 minutes, their running speed was still quite fast. But even so, it had only been less than 5 hours since the last call with Qin Xingyan. Even if they reached the destination, there was nothing they could do. If they followed the road to Jiangjin to find Qin Xingyan, there was a high possibility that they would pass by each other for various reasons. After all, Su Xinxing was not good at perception, and as Su Xinxing's future disciple, and Xinghua's attainments in perception could be imagined. Forget it, there's nothing to do at Crimson Cloud Mountain. It's better than missing it. Moreover, if we go there early, we can investigate without disturbing others. In the end, Su Shenxing could only shake his head and continue to rush. Since teacher has said so, then I can only comply. Xinghua didn't object to Su Shenxing's decision, but rather agreed very readily. Not long after, Su Shenxing finished running the mountain path that was very long for ordinary people and came to the foot of Crimson Cloud Mountain. The resort that had been built here before was almost finished. And their decoration was very considerate, minimizing the damage to the vegetation and the land as much as possible. It was more like a farmhouse, which complemented the style of nature. The big maple tree, which was the real body of Master Hong Yi, was not dug up. In order to restrain the monsters, Master Hong Yi simply risked abandoning his real body here and went to the peak to protect and guard the monsters. Fortunately, it hadn't been long since they were beaten up by Su Shenxing. The monsters remembered the fear of being beaten up and the kindness of being saved by the disciples of Bailu Temple, so there wasn't any big news for the time being. That's right, for the time being. Until 2 days ago, a few waiters who somehow got their hands on air guns sneaked up the mountain from the resort villa at the foot of the mountain, wanting to experience the fun of hunting. As a result, they killed the only son of a weasel demon who had yet to transform into a human form. Thus, in a fit of rage, it killed all of the waiters. By the time the Bailu Temple found out about this, it was already too late. A riot was imminent, and the legendary big news was inevitable. From this point of view, during the time he went to Fusang, the girl did not put down her own cultivation. Her speed of travel was obviously much faster than before. After greeting the elders of the Bailu Temple, the man went straight into the library. For someone like Xinghua, who had used Su Shenxing's name to sneak in, there was naturally no way for her to follow him into the library. In addition, after Qin Xingyan entered the library, a strange scene occurred in Crimson Heaven Mountain. For some reason, the Sea of Clouds, which was originally one of the 8 sceneries of Crimson Heaven, suddenly surged, and a greenish-yellow light was faintly discernible in the Sea of Clouds. Although the Taoist priests of the Bailu Temple did not know what had happened, most of them had an ominous premonition of fear and trepidation. Su Shenxing scratched the side of his neck with his hind legs, and then his cat face became gloomy. Why was this matter getting more and more complicated? It was almost dark. It seemed that there was no way to solve it before dinner. With this thought in mind, he could only accept his fate and run back to Crimson Heaven Mountain. However, after entering the territory of Crimson Heaven Mountain, even Su Shenxing felt that something was wrong. The sky, which was originally clear at noon, was now covered by thick clouds. Green and yellow light constantly flashed through the clouds, accompanied by thunderous rumbles. Ordinary people would probably think that this was just ordinary thunder, and at most, they would shout something like, "It's raining, put away the clothes." However, Su Shenxing felt that there was a considerable amount of energy flowing through the clouds. Because his perception was not outstanding, Su Shenxing could not distinguish what kind of energy this energy was on Earth. By now, even he had been influenced by what he saw and heard. He already knew that the energy on Earth was classified into a very complicated category. There was true qi, magic power, spiritual power, true essence, holy light, psionic power, and so on. However, because of this, the fact that Su Shenxing could perceive it meant that the power was indeed very strong. At least, after returning from the other world, Su Shenxing had not seen such a powerful existence. Even the old monster that he killed in Jiangjin, who was said to have returned from the Yellow Springs, paled in comparison to this power. When Su Shenxing ran to the gate of the Bailu Temple, Xinghua was already waiting for him there, holding a shining holy sword that was longer than her height. "What's the situation now?" Su Shenxing jumped over a few steps to the girl's side and asked. "The Bailu Temple is in a mess now." At first, the elders of the Bailu Temple thought that a demon in the back of the mountain was about to undergo a tribulation, but when they sent people to ask, they found that there was no such situation. Even the Master Hong Yi knew nothing about it. Therefore, later on, other elders thought that they had taken in a demon and violated the ancestors' rules, which led to the heavenly tribulation. The most important thing now is to get rid of all those demons. Even if they can't kill them, they should at least drive them out. However, many of the disciples of the Bailu temple who have friendly relations with the demons disagreed. In short, the supporters and opponents are arguing so much that they are about to roll up their sleeves and beat each other up. Nonsense, there really is a heavenly punishment. When it took in the demons, nothing happened. Now it's falling down. Heavenly punishment's efficiency is no different from that of a civil servant. Su Shenxing pursed his lips, his cat face full of disdain. Then, he asked, then how is Qin Xingyan now? The restrictions on the Bailu Temple's library are too strong. Unless I use the shining holy sword to break through, I still can't enter. If I don't break through, the people of the Bailu Temple might misunderstand. Therefore, I think it's better to wait for you to come before making a decision. And Xinghua scratched her face embarrassedly, feeling that there was no use for her to stay in the Bailu Temple. Don't blame yourself, you did a good job. Su Shenxing patted the little girl's forehead with his cat paw like an old man, completely unaware of how funny this scene was. Anyway, there's no use in continuing to stay here. Sit on my back, we'll go straight to the library. Do I still have to sit on that? Xinghua's little face paled, and then she said righteously, no, teacher, if I sit on your back, I'll slow you down. You go first, I'll catch up with you soon. Su Shenxing thought about it and agreed. Then, he confirmed the next steps with the little girl who had escaped a disaster, and rushed up the mountain to the Bailu Temple, leaving behind the little girl whose face was full of joy and an expression of, I'm so smart. Chapter 176. Although some modern equipment had been connected to the Bailu Temple, as a relatively important library, there had been a powerful restriction since ancient times to prevent others from prying into it. Moreover, because it was left behind by the ancestors of the Bailu Temple, it was operated by the power of the earth veins. In terms of level, it was unknown how much higher it was than the current temple master of the Bailu Temple. Once it was broken, there was almost no possibility of repairing it, so it was not modified. Therefore, in bad weather, the library would be very dark. This was not a problem for most of the disciples of the Bailu Temple, because as long as the procedures were completed, the books borrowed could be brought back to the room to read. However, Qin Xingyan clearly did not intend to do so. Although Su Shenxing did not urge her too much, she could still hear that the other party was a little anxious, so she directly rushed back to the Bailu Temple, and then directly went into the library to search for information related to soul cutting without rest. In the dark room, piles of ancient books were piled on the floor emitting a faint sandalwood fragrance. The girl was also sitting cross-legged on the floor, tirelessly looking for her target from the pile of books. After an unknown amount of time, her eyes lit up. This is it, I finally found it. Holding the thread-bound ancient book with Azure Netherworld Theory written on the cover, Qin Xingyan's face revealed a mixed expression of joy and relief at the completion of a great task. The author of this book called himself Old Man Ji. Born with a netherworld body, he did not belong to the world of the living nor the netherworld, which made his childhood very miserable. However, this did not make Old Man Ji yield. Instead, it made him work even harder to cultivate, just to change his fate. After growing up, this Old Man Ji joined Buddhism and studied Buddhism. One day, he accidentally made a breakthrough, and used Buddhist magic to forge two divine swords, named White Tower and Lu Guan. After that, he exchanged knowledge with his Taoist friends, comprehended the Taoist scriptures, and referred to the three corpses execution method, and used the two divine swords to cut off a part of his soul that was exposed outside of his body, and cultivated it into a half-spirit, thus becoming the first half-spirit in the world. He jumped out of the two realms of yin and yang, and was not bound by the rules of the two realms. Later, he was invited by Yama to live on the other side of the river of forgetfulness in the underworld, and since then, he had not appeared in the world. I see, In addition to a sharp weapon that can cut the soul, there is also a need for the 3 corpses execution method. Many people might think that the 3 corpses execution method had long been lost, but this was not the truth. But that wasn't the case. There was a handwritten copy in the White Deer Temple's library. It wasn't just the White Deer Temple. In fact, almost all the sects with a long history had these things. But after the end of the mythological era, this thing had long become tasteless and of little value. The reason was very simple. For example, if a restaurant got a recipe that was enough to be the treasure of the restaurant, it would most likely not show it to its peers. But if they got a recipe on how to cook dragon meat, they would most likely show it to others. Because there were no dragons in this world, even if they showed it, they would not lose anything. It was the same for the 3 corpses execution method. No one in the world could cultivate to the level of 3 corpses execution method, so it did not matter if others saw it. That was why this thing became a staple in ancient sections. So, I'm almost done with the preparation. I'll borrow the divine artifact from other sections. With Senior Sue's means, it should be no problem. There were still many sects in the Celestial Empire that still had divine artifacts, but many of them were too weak. They did not have enough cultivation to use them. It shouldn't be too difficult to find one that could sever souls from the rest of the items. After writing down the solution she found in the notebook she carried with her, the previous page was a grocery list. The girl planned to leave the library and rush back to Jiangjin to deliver the information to Su Shinxing. However, the girl, who was out of her focused state, finally felt a powerful force gathering above her head. Almost without any hesitation, she rolled to the back. Almost at the same time, the sound of glass breaking came from outside the library. Qin Xingyan was willing to bet that this was the sound of the ancestors' restriction being destroyed. Then, the roof and the place he was just standing on were blasted into pieces by a yellow beam of light from the sky. What? Ever since Qin Xingyan joined the Bailu Temple, he had never seen an enemy attack the library. Now that this happened in front of her, it was hard for her to accept. But immediately, she realized that something was wrong. What the hell are you? Looking at the thing that flashed across the destroyed roof, Qin Xingyan growled in surprise. After a moment, as if it heard her question, the black shadow finally stopped in front of her. It was a sparrow. Or rather, it was a green bird that looked very similar to a sparrow. Qin Xingyan remembered that he had seen this creature when he was a child. Green bird. Is that you, Green Dawn? Unfortunately, it's not me. The other party didn't pretend to be polite and just replied indifferently, my name is Green Bird, I'm Green Dawn's elder brother. Were those riots caused by you? Qin Xingyan continued to ask. Although the library was almost completely isolated from the outside sound, Qin Xingyan could now hear the constant shouting of the Bailu Temple disciples from other places. The place where the main hall was supposed to be on the mountain was now occupied by a column of black smoke. It seemed that it was also on fire. Probably. The other party didn't deny or confirm, but this kind of indifferent attitude made Qin Xingyan feel even more uncomfortable. Why did you come here? Qin Xingyan asked sternly. To retrieve the thing that Green Dawn lost in this world. The sparrow that called itself Green Dawn flew into the air and looked down at Qin Xingyan. Okay, quickly hand it over. You mean, the thing that you're missing is actually in my hands? Qin Xingyan quickly went through all the useful assets she had, but she didn't find anything valuable. That's right, quickly hand it over, or I won't be polite. The sparrow arrogantly gesticulated, but it was almost taken away by a passing lynx. Even if you say that. Wait, the girl was originally confused, but at this time, she suddenly remembered something. That's right, when Green Dawn left, he did leave something for her, and that was the feather of the Green Dawn, which was said to bring good luck and happiness. What do you want that for? Qin Xingyan became vigilant. I don't need to talk nonsense with you. Tell me, are you going to hand it over or not? The sparrow suddenly grew in size, and in just 2 breaths, it became almost as big as a peacock. It stood on the beam that was not completely burned down, and showed Qin Xingyan a demonstration. Right at this moment, a little black cat slipped in from nowhere and easily knocked over Qing Fu, who was in the middle of striking a pose, with its head. Chapter 177. Yo, I'm not late yet, am I? Su Shenxing waved his paw at Qin Xingyan, who was still in shock. This voice, don't tell me it's Senior Su. How did you become like this? When Su Shenxing was turned into a cat by Mo Li, Qin Xingyan was helping Chihaya Fukuyama with his special training at the Earth God in Jiangjin, so he didn't know what happened. Now that he saw this scene without any mental preparation, he was so shocked that he stuttered. It's nothing, just a small problem. I'll be fine soon. Su Shenxing shook the cat, then looked at the cyan sparrow with his round eyes due to the dim environment in the library. He asked disapprovingly, is that guy the culprit? Although he still found it hard to believe that Su Shenxing turned into a cat, Qin Xingyan still nodded and confirmed his doubts. The cyan sparrow flew in the sky angrily and roared loudly with a voice that was completely different from its size. Damn mortals! Damn demonic cats, you have to pay for this. Fire arrow mallet. Gua dash. The sparrow was once again sent flying by the black cat's unexpected attack and hit a bookshelf. The bookshelf couldn't bear the weight and fell down with a creak, burying the sparrow in wood fragments and ancient books. Senior Su, I think we should at least wait for it to finish speaking, then ask it why it did this. Qin Xingyan, who was watching from the side, expressed his opinion with uncertainty. You're still too young, Miss Xingyan. A dream. Su Shenxing immediately stood up and pretended to be mature as he reprimanded the girl. When I was cleaning Sakura's apartment, I found your household register under the sofa. In terms of age, I'm 1 year older than you, Senior Su. Qin Xingyan sighed. Also, can you stop calling me that weird name? Su Shenxing immediately turned his cat ears and pretended that he didn't hear anything. He continued to speak calmly, let me tell you, in this case, the other party's purpose can be categorized into 2 categories. One is simply to satisfy their own desires, or to be psychopathic or something else. The other is because of some difficulties that they have to violate their own moral values to do evil. After a pause, he continued, in the first case, even if you listen to what it has to say, you won't get anything other than anger. In the end, you'll still have to fight to solve the problem. In the second case, if you put it in a literary work or anime, it's the so-called whitewashing. When the time comes, the people facing the difficult choice will become us. Instead of that, it's better to just kill it before it speaks. Then, we'll feel at ease knowing nothing. Qin Xingyan subconsciously felt that there was something wrong with Su Shenxing's twisted logic, but he couldn't find an argument to refute it. He could only stand there with a bitter face, not knowing what to do. Fortunately, someone helped him out of this situation. The pile of broken books and wood that buried the sparrow was suddenly blown away. Then, a green, chicken-sized sparrow jumped out again. I was careless just now, but this time, V's headbutt. Aw! This time, the sparrow was directly knocked out of the house by Su Shenxing's headbutt. After hitting the hole in the wall, it disappeared from the sight of the man and the cat in a parabola that resembled Newton's classical mechanics. As she watched the sparrow disappear, Qin Xingyan was stunned for a moment. She then gritted her teeth and said to Su Shenxing, who was currently smoothing her feathers, I'm sorry, Senior Su. Even so, I still want to know why it did this, because... Halfway through his sentence, the girl's voice became low. She couldn't believe it. They were both green birds, and Qing Meng could be said to be the green bird that saved her life. But this time, the guy that appeared was inexplicably fierce. Qin Xingyan couldn't accept it at all. Su Shenxing raised his head and looked at the girl with his bright yellow cat eyes. The girl looked back at him without any fear, and Su Shenxing could feel her determination. Huff! Finally, we're here. At this moment, and Xinghua finally arrived at the scene. Why didn't you use the power of the holy flashing sword? Su Shenxing looked away and asked the little girl, with the power of the holy flashing sword, it wouldn't take more than a second to get here from the foot of the mountain, right? His question made the little girl scratch her face embarrassedly. Right now, this body of mine is still too young and too weak. Even if I do my best to refine my magic power, I can only activate the sacred sword of brilliance once. If I use that opportunity to travel, won't I become a burden that can't do anything when I arrive here? It's better if I don't make it in time. The little girl answered logically. That's why I asked you to sit on my back. Thank you for your hospitality. Xinghua rolled her eyes. That way, my whole body will be weak, and I'll be even weaker than if I use the holy flashing sword. Qin Xingyan looked at the little girl who was talking and laughing with Su Shenxing. He couldn't help but be surprised. She looked like a child, but whether it was the way she talked or the way she behaved, it didn't match her age at all. At this moment, the thick dark clouds in the sky suddenly began to gather like a whirlpool, finally forming a gigantic bird. Its wings were like the clouds in the sky, and its wingspan spanned hundreds of miles. Just by flapping its wings, it created a gale that was strong enough to turn all the tofu dregs at the foot of the mountain into ruins. However, it was clear that the enemy's attack was not limited to its wings. The gigantic cloudbird opened its beak, and purplish-blue lightning flashed continuously in what should be its neck and tail pouch. Finally, the lightning gathered in its beak. Just by looking at the lightning, there was no doubt about its power. The next moment, a voltage of several billion Ford easily penetrated the air that was supposed to be insulating and turned into terrifying fork-shaped lightning, shrouding the entire Crimson Cloud Mountain. How dare you do this? Su Shenxing was furious. He jumped to the roof of the library in 2 or 3 steps, and then jumped toward the lightning. The next moment, a roar resounded throughout the entire Crimson Cloud Mountain, and almost all the lightning fell, in the main hall of the Bailu Temple. Well, because this thing was standing on the top of the mountain, and it was the highest place on the mountain, plus there was a dragon-shaped lightning rod on the roof, it caused all the lightning that the enormous cloud bird in the sky had brewed with great difficulty to strike this place. As for Su Shenxing, because the library originally only had 1 floor, and the terrain of the building was far lower than the main hall of the Bailu Temple, and he was now just a black cat, even if he jumped up, he would only be a sesame seed in front of the power of nature. Naturally, the lightning couldn't hit him. This caused the disciples in the main hall of the White Deer Monastery to be filled with grief. They had finally managed to extinguish the fire that had started for no apparent reason, only to be struck by a bolt of lightning out of nowhere and set aflame again. Forget it. An elder patted the shoulder of the temple dean, who was in tears. It's all burnt. Chapter 178. Leaving aside the Bailu Temple, which was the main hall of the temple once again, Su Shenxing did not suffer the impact that he had imagined. Instead, he passed through the wings of the giant cloud bird without any hindrance. He made a 720-degree turn in the sky and successfully landed with his face firmly on the ground. Due to his posture, he inevitably had the same feeling as when he fell from the sky and created a crater. Where am I? Where are my teammates? Who the F***ck is attacking me? Obviously, these 3 questions were not difficult to answer. Su Shenxing was now about halfway up Crimson Cloud Mountain. He had to admit that he was lucky that he did not roll all the way to the foot of the mountain. Qin Xingyan and Xinghua were still in the library at the top of the mountain. As for the electric arcs that struck him from time to time, there was no doubt that it was the work of the cloud bird. After the test just now, Su Shenxing also understood that the cloud bird was not the Kuanpeng in Zhuangzi's, the carefree tour. It was just a green sparrow that transformed into a giant bird with the help of clouds. That was why his headbutt did not hit the cloud bird. After all, clouds were just floating objects made of water droplets or ice crystals. They were similar to fog. If Su Shenxing was still in his human form, he could summon the holy sword and cut down the cloud bird's incarnation. However, he was now in the form of a cat. Even if Yunlin guaranteed that he would be fine even if he was hit by 1,000,000,000 volts, it would be much more troublesome to kill the cloud bird. Of course, the current situation was not unsolvable. In fact, compared to the various near-hopeless situations that Su Xinxing had encountered before, the current situation could even be said to be better. First of all, the culprit that Xinghua was looking for when she returned to this era was almost certain to be the green bird. In other words, if she defeated the green bird, her mission would be completed. Besides, although Su Xinxing had been lured away from the mountain, well, this should be the active sentence, even if he was not beside Qin Xingyan, there was still Xinghua with the holy sword. If the cloud bird wanted to attack, it would definitely be killed in an instant if it exposed a flaw. In the end, even after becoming a cat, Su Xinxing was confident that he was the strongest cat on earth. And the so-called cat, in the food chain, was the bane of sparrows. Thinking of this, Su Xinxing shook his fur and ran to the top of the mountain like a gust of wind. On the other hand, after losing Su Xinxing, Qin Xingyan's situation was not as optimistic as he thought. Due to the fact that the sacred flashing sword could only be used once, Xinghua could only grit her teeth and endure the cloud bird's terrifying lightning. If it weren't for Qin Xingyan's 100 herbs, Su Xinxing would probably only see his only student almost roasted alive by the time he returned. Qin Xingyan also had a flying sword called Red Sleeves. However, due to the huge difference in strength, Red Sleeves would be shot down by Qin Xingyan's lightning every time it flew halfway. Why on earth? For Green Dawn's feathers, would you do something so outrageous? Due to the large consumption of magical power, Qin Xingyan was already a little out of breath when he spoke. Shut up, mortal, you don't understand what it means at all. To Qin Xingyan's surprise, Green Dawn, who had been ignored the previous few times, did not try to bluff her way out this time. Instead, it roared angrily. It's hope. However, Qin Xingyan was not frightened. Instead, he answered without hesitation. Wah. When Green Dawn left, it told me that its feathers can bring happiness and hope to others. Therefore, I will never hand over the hope that my friend has entrusted to me so easily. Speaking of this, Qin Xingyan threw out a large number of talismans. The yellow talismans moved without wind and formed several formations on the ground. The girl's face changed from calm to serious. As the first disciple of the Bailu Temple, as long as she was well prepared, she was qualified to use the spirit vein of Crimson Heaven Mountain. Although it was not as powerful as using the Bailu Temple's treasure to control the spirit vein, it was still more powerful. The old Abbey Dean had held on for 30 seconds when he was in the perfect form Su Xinxing. Well said, but it's meaningless. Qing Fu snorted coldly. That's right, the feathers of the blue bird can indeed bring good luck to people. However, in our entire lives, only 3 of our tail feathers have such an effect. The reason for this is that the 3 tail feathers contain the 3 souls of the blue bird. Xinghua noticed that although Qing Fu was still as cold and arrogant as before, she was now able to communicate with Qin Xingyan on an equal footing, compared to when she used to attack Qin Xingyan without a word. Although it didn't say anything, it seemed that this spiritual bird had acknowledged Qin Xingyan. Anyway, before Su Xinxing came back, this situation where she didn't need to fight was the best. She glanced at Qin Xingyan, who was frowning, and muttered to herself. She hoped that this Qi practitioner could stall for as long as possible. Because of this, every time a Green Dawn gives away all its tail feathers, no matter how long it has cultivated, it will immediately fall into samsara and enter the animal path because of the loss of its soul. Green Dawn's voice became lower and lower, as if it was sad for the fate of the Green Dawn. Could it be that Green Dawn's tail feathers? Thinking of how impatient Green Dawn was to take away the feathers, Qin Xingyan widened his eyes. Have they all been given away? No, there are 2 left. Didn't that mean that except for this one, there were no missing feathers? Qin Xingyan showed a rare expression of, "Are you kidding me?" Even Xinghua, who was listening on the side, staggered and almost fell. But it suddenly suffered from soullessness some time ago, and now it has lost one of its souls and 4 of its spirits. If it wasn't for the fact that as a spiritual bird, its vitality is much stronger than ordinary creatures, it would have died long ago. But whether it loses its soul or its spirits, it will fall into a very dangerous state. The cloud bird's voice sounded regretful, and no one knew what it was hiding. But after hearing this, Qin Xingyan put down his hands, because there was no reason to continue fighting with the cloud bird. You should have told me earlier. If that's the case, my feathers, wait a minute. Before Qin Xingyan took out the feathers he carried with him, Su Xinqing had already run to the platform. Don't give it the feathers. But... Qin Xingyan's eyes widened. He didn't expect Su Xinqing to say something like this. However, Su Xinqing didn't look at him. Instead, he stared at the cloud bird in the sky and asked unhappily, "Don't you think it's too shameful to only tell me half the story?" The cloud bird was silent for a moment and didn't answer Su Xinqing. "Senior Su, what's going on?" The cloud bird's attitude made Qin Xingyan realize that things weren't as simple as he thought. "Xingyan, do you know why this guy attacked us as soon as we met? It didn't have any intention of talking to us at all." Su Xinqing turned his head and stared at Qin Xingyan with his bright yellow cat eyes. His words made Qin Xingyan suddenly realize that the cloud bird's actions were indeed very strange. The blue bird wasn't a ferocious monster. Logically speaking, even if it needed the feathers urgently, it wouldn't attack them as soon as it came up. "If I'm not wrong, you must have been in poor health for a while, right?" Su Xinqing continued to ask. "Yes, I was always sick in bed when I was young." Qin Xingyan subconsciously answered honestly. "Then when did you recover from your illness?" The young girl remembered that she had indeed received Qing Meng's feathers, and her body had suddenly gotten better. "That's right. This guy attacked you from the beginning because he thought you knew that without that feather, you would die soon. But Senior Su, I'm about to enter the Golden Core realm. A mere illness, unfortunately, I'm afraid your condition isn't a simple illness." Su Xinqing sighed. "I'm sorry, but I can't solve it in a short time." A long time ago, Su Xinqing had noticed that something was wrong with the girl's body. However, just like how berserkers only knew how to cut people and not bandage them, if they used force, they might break someone's arm before it was bandaged. Su Xinqing, who wasn't skilled in this field, didn't have the confidence to cure the girl, so he didn't say anything. So, in the end, the negotiation fell apart. And Xinghua turned her head away from Qin Xingyan and hugged Su Xinqing. "Teacher, are you confident that you can defeat that big guy now?" "Of course." Su Xinqing probably wanted to give a thumbs up, but unfortunately, a cat's claws couldn't make such complicated movements. In the end, it looked like Xiao Hei was struggling and stretched out its claws. "Although I have some other ideas, I won't feel at ease if I don't beat this guy up. How can my hair grow if I don't feel at ease?" In the blink of an eye, the cloud bird also understood that things were not going to end well. It spun around and stirred up a powerful gust of wind that was close to a horizontal tornado. It almost rolled up the ground of Crimson Cloud's mountain. "Use the power of the Holy Sword of Brilliance and throw me towards the eye of the tornado." Su Xinqing raised his head and shouted at the little girl. "Understood." "Bizarre, hey." The little girl pinched Su Xinqing's cat head. "Su Xinqing, don't pinch my face." "Ah." After 2 rounds of accumulating power, she shouted a strange chant and threw him towards the tornado that was surging towards him. Oh, my King Kong's gun is broken." Although he wanted to complain about the girl's throwing action, Su Xinqing finally adjusted himself to conform to the principles of aerodynamics and flew towards the eye of the tornado. By the way, is that a dog's skill? Chapter 179. Although the Crimson Cloud 8 sceneries of Crimson Cloud Mountain was not well known among ordinary people, it was a rare sight for many mountain climbers and sightseeing enthusiasts. Therefore, even though the Tourism Bureau had said in advance that to ensure the safety of tourists, climbing Crimson Cloud Mountain without permission was prohibited, there were still some people who did so secretly. Mr. Su from Jin City was one of them. Although not many people knew about him, before he got married, Mr. Su was also a well-known backpacker in the circle. However, after getting married and having a lovely daughter, he no longer had any private time and no longer went out to travel with his former backpackers. The rumored Crimson Cloud Mountain had always been one of his unfulfilled wishes. Therefore, during these few days when the company was on vacation and his wife took his daughter back to visit her parents, he found his old backpacker friends who used to travel with him. They planned to form a tour group to Crimson Cloud Mountain. Of course, it was without permission. For some reason, it was very difficult to get permission to climb Crimson Cloud Mountain. If it weren't for the recent construction of holiday estates at the foot of Crimson Cloud Mountain and the lower part of the mountain that had begun to open to tourists, he would have thought that it might be a testing ground for the secret weapons of the Chinese Empire. In short, today he finally climbed the Crimson Cloud Mountain that he had dreamed of, although there was still some distance to the top of the mountain. The other backpacker friends were finally warned by the public officials. He was the only one who insisted on climbing up. However, it was here that he saw a scene that ordinary people might not be able to see in their lifetime. Originally, the dark clouds in the sky accumulated and gathered, finally forming a huge cloud bird. However, the sky did not clear up because of this. The dark clouds were still there, and the clouds, which were originally calm, were now like the sea in a typhoon. The waves rose and fell, majestic and spectacular. At first, he thought that the cloud bird was just a phenomenon formed by natural clouds. After all, he was a person who had traveled extensively and had witnessed many miraculous scenes. But then he realized that he seemed to be wrong. This was because the huge cloud bird was just like a real creature. When it flapped its wings, it formed a powerful hurricane. If it wasn't for the fact that the dark clouds were gradually swallowed by the cloud bird and seemed to have calmed down a little, it would have rained a long time ago. It was no joke to encounter heavy rain near the top of the mountain. Once they were involved in a mudslide, they would probably die. However, Mr. Su felt that his target should not be the heavy rain, but the monster in the sky. If it were an ordinary person, they would have been scared to death. But Mr. Su was different. Although he instinctively hugged the big rock to prevent it from being swept away by the sudden wind, his mind was still calm. He tried his best to maintain his balance in the wind and moved little by little to the lee of the wind. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. However, the sudden thunder gave him a fright. He quickly looked up to see if it was going to rain. Compared to strong winds, heavy rain was more likely to cause landslides and mudslides. Reality proved that he was overthinking. The sky was still cloudy, but there was no sign of rain. After a while, Mr. Su, who had nothing to do on the leeward side, suddenly had the urge to court death. No matter how the cloud bird was formed, he could not let go of such a magical scene. Therefore, he took out his phone and started recording. Along the way, Mr. Su checked the signal and found that both the 4G network and the phone signal were out of range. Because of this, he accidentally dropped his phone on the ground and broke a corner of it. It was not uncommon for there to be no signal in the wilderness, so Mr. Su did not take it to heart. He was a little disappointed that he couldn't announce this shocking phenomenon in real time on his Weibo. After all, the cloud bird's gigantic body could almost cover half of the mountains in Zhejiang. Even the people at the foot of the mountain and in the nearby cities should be able to see it. He couldn't be considered the first person to discover it. Fortunately, when this video was released, he would definitely gain a lot of fans for being able to capture such a spectacle at such a close distance. Unfortunately, he did not know that the cloud bird could only be seen from Crimson Cloud Mountain. Even if people from other places looked in this direction, they could only see a sea of clouds that looked like upside-down boiling water. Carefully, he reached his hand out from behind the rock and placed it at a suitable angle so that he could not leave the leeward side and see the video recorded by the phone. However, the video displayed by the phone surprised him. Although the cloud bird was still there, for some reason, it seemed to have been cut in half vertically from head to tail by a huge sharp blade. The ability to move like a living creature had completely disappeared. It was as if it had been killed and turned into a product of ordinary dark clouds. As time passed, it gradually dissipated. What the hell is going on? Mr. Su was puzzled. Fortunately, he did not need to worry about it. Not long after he went down the mountain that day, someone from the relevant department brought a man dressed like a Taoist to visit him at the hotel where he was staying. After the group of people left, Mr. Su, who came back to his senses, realized that he seemed to have missed a day's worth of memory. However, with the explanation of his friends who came to Crimson Cloud Mountain with him, he found out that he had accidentally slept for a whole day because he was too tired from the excitement the day before yesterday. Even though Mr. Su was confused by this explanation, it was not just one person who said that. Furthermore, he did not lose any belongings, and there was still a long time before the holiday ended, so he took it as the truth. The next day, they successfully obtained the permit to climb Crimson Cloud Mountain and took many pictures of the scenery there. It could be considered a fruitful trip. When did I break a corner of my phone? On the day they were about to leave Zhejiang for home, Mr. Su wanted to organize the information in his phone because he did not have enough memory on his phone. It was then that he noticed that his phone seemed to have changed. He scratched his head and did not think much of it. He organized the pictures that he had taken earlier. Crimson Cloud 8 sceneries is not bad. This trip was worth it, especially that 100-year-old red maple. It is a work of art. These pictures are so beautiful. When I go back, my wife will be shocked. Then, Why is there a shedding black cat in this picture of the Taoist temple at the top of the mountain? I should delete it. Chapter 180. After defeating the Cloudbreaker bird, Su Xinxing returned to White Deer Temple with the green bird in his mouth and locked it in a birdcage. This birdcage is made of the essence of thousand arts, dark iron, cold jade, and the secret refining method of the Bailu Temple that has been passed down for thousands of years, Heaven 100 refinements. More than 20 of us worked together to make it. The old Abbey Dean of the Bailu Temple stroked his snow-white goatee and proudly introduced the birdcage to Su Xinxing. It's called the One Yang Nine Guards Cage. It's as famous as the suppressing demon tower of Mount Shu. It's a rare Taoist treasure. To be able to use such a thing to imprison Qing Miao, it seemed that the burning of the newly built main hall of the White Deer Monastery had indeed infuriated the monastery head. But I heard that Shu Mountain's demon subduing pagoda collapsed a few hundred years ago because it was a shoddy construction and the quality was too poor. It's said that someone was killed by it. Isn't it too unlucky to be as famous as that? Su Xinxing questioned. I always feel that Taoist things are not as durable as Buddhist ones. Almsgiver, you're mistaken. The construction quality of Buddhist and Taoist is actually similar. If you don't believe me, you can look at the Leifeng Tower. There's a song that says, Fahai, you don't know love. Leifeng Tower will fall, he's singing. As a Taoist master, you should have some integrity. Don't compare yourself to others. Su Xinxing complained in his heart. He then turned around and saw the green bird, who had just woken up, pulling the 2 bars of the cage open and trying to squeeze out of the gap. Where's the promised Taoist treasure? Su Xinxing kicked the bird back into the birdcage and looked at the old Abbey Dean helplessly. Actually, the main usage of the One Yang Nine Guards cage is to throw it out like the flipping sky seal, the invisible dragon rod, and the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda. The old Abbey Dean was silent for a moment and then said with a righteous face. In short, it seemed that the Bailu Temple's captivity level was not reliable. However, Su Xinxing and the others didn't really want to kill the green bird. In the end, they booked a room for the disappointed old Abbey Dean, ignoring the other party's enthusiastic inquiries. Do you want an alchemy furnace? Or a fully automatic roasting chicken stove will do. I'll ask my disciples to go down the mountain to buy it. After casting a holy domain barrier outside the room to prevent it from escaping, the few of them stared at the green bird in the room. Qin Xingyan, how do you think we should deal with this guy? At first, he wanted to ask it about Goldbox conjecture, and then beat it. If he could not answer, he could not ask it about Goldbox conjecture. And, it was Goldbox conjecture. Couldn't ask it Goldbox conjecture and beat it if it couldn't answer it could it? Therefore, Su Xinxing gave the decision to Qin Xingyan, the first victim, after he was tired of comparing the size of their eyes. Since Su Xinxing defeated the green bird, the girl seemed to be absent-minded. She was probably thinking about what the green bird said before. Senior Su, after a while, the girl showed a determined and relieved expression, and said softly, I still want to return Qing Meng's feather. Her words made Su Xinxing widen his eyes, and his voice became a little more serious, but you'll die if you do that. My life, in a sense, was given to me by Qing Meng. That's why I was able to live until now. In other words, Qing Meng has given me nearly 15 years of life, and now it's time for me to return my life to him. Qin Xingyan said softly with sadness and reluctance. She squeezed out a smile and said, it's just that if I do that, it'll be difficult to explain to Master and the others. Do you want to die? Su Xinxing didn't answer, but continued to ask. The two of them looked at each other like this, and the air seemed to have become heavy. Of course I don't want to die. Qin Xingyan's smile collapsed, and tears slid down her white jade-like face, but there's no other way. If I don't do this, Qing Meng will die. I can't just sit and watch it die. The girl's body was trembling, as if she was afraid of her impending death. But even so, she had no intention of retracting her decision. She just looked at Su Xinxing stubbornly with tears in her eyes. Miss, I respect you for being a man. The green bird, who was tied up and lying on the table with an expression of, I'm almost a useless bird, heard Qin Xingyan's words, and couldn't help but struggle to express its appreciation for the girl. Shut up. Su Xinxing stepped on it again with his paw. For some reason, a suspicious blush appeared on the bird's face. Su Xinxing didn't care about the bird's strange behavior similar to Stockholm Syndrome. Instead, he wagged his tail, and his somewhat serious expression completely softened. I see, I understand. But in fact, you don't need to return the feather to the bird called Qing Meng. But, if there's a better way to solve the problem, then there's no need to use such a stupid method, right? Senior Su, didn't you say that you don't know anything about souls? Qin Xingyan had pinned her hopes on Su Xinxing at first, but at that time, Su Xinxing told her that he only had some achievements in physics. Yes, I don't know much about that stuff, Su Xinxing nodded noncommittally. Even in the other world, Su Xinxing had to rely on exorcism, physics, to get past this kind of enemy. But, I didn't say that Emily can't do anything about this situation, right? Then why was I so distressed just now? It's simple. After returning to Sakura's apartment, Emily spent about 10 minutes folding a paper crane by hand. Then, he mimicked Doraemon's classic pose when he took out a prop. Then, he used an emotionless voice to add some sound effects, clang clang. This thing is called Soul Guard. It can ensure that your soul won't be attacked by external objects. Su Xinxing aptly explained Emily's actions, bring this and you'll be safe. Qing Meng, who was still tied up, obviously didn't believe it. However, in the end, she couldn't persuade Su Xinxing and the others. In the end, she could only skeptically take the paper crane and leave the human world. In a sense, this farce could be considered to have come to an end. After the incident, Qin Xingyan began to move about in the sect that had artifacts that could cut souls. Li Tenghua's family also waited patiently. Su Xinxing was still in the form of a black cat. Because Emily refused to help him learn magic, it seemed that he could only continue to wait for the effects to wear off. Just when everything seemed to have calmed down, and Xinghua found Su Xinxing lying on the roof, sunbathing. Teacher, let's go on a date. Chapter 181. Although most of the sects in Huaxia were different from foreign religions, there were occasionally some that were similar. For example, Rosuism, which worshipped the West Queen Mother as the main deity. Although the secular world believed that the Luo ancestor sect was founded by Luo Menghong 500 years ago, which was around the Ming dynasty, the truth was not so. The Luo ancestor sect could be traced back to about 3,000 years ago, to a vast neighboring country to the west of the Zhou dynasty, the Western Mother Empire, also known as the Western Mother Empire. In the biography of the Emperor of Mu, it was recorded that after the Emperor of Mu defeated the War Hounds, he began to tour the west and came to this place. He met the West Queen Mother, who was still on the ground at that time, and received a gift from her. Therefore, he lived until he was more than 100 years old at that time, when the average age was only 40 years old. Rosuism was a sect founded by the believers of the West Queen Mother who witnessed the ascension of the West Queen Mother. Different from Buddhism and other sects that cultivated reincarnation and self-cultivation, Rosuism had almost no special cultivation methods, so it was also called the Wu-wei sect. However, because of this, Rosuism was different from other sects in the inner world. Almost all of them were ordinary people, and they were not afraid of karma, so they could get involved in the affairs of the human world at will. Similar to the churches in the West, the believers of Rosuism would only pass down the ancient beliefs from generation to generation as spiritual sustenance, and wait for the orders of the deities they worship to be interpreted by the clergy in the sect called the Di Tian messengers. Once during the Manchu dynasty, there were Di Tian messengers who passed down false oracles, fabricating that the West Queen Mother was called the Wu-wei Divine Mother, and instructing the believers to change their identities and rebel in the name of Qing Shui, Tianli, Qinglian, etc., in order to gain wealth and power in the secular world. However, as time passed, because the spiritual energy in the world was getting thinner and thinner, the oracles passed down became rarer and rarer. Some of the younger generation who were born in the believers' families began to doubt the authenticity of the West Queen Mother. This was the main reason why the sects in the Celestial Empire could easily go extinct in modern times without supernatural abilities. The people of the Celestial Empire were too damn pragmatic. On this day, the current leader of Rosuism had just finished his meal and was planning to find a place to bask in the sun and take an afternoon nap to complete the doctrine of Rosuism. Everything is created by the mind. Do nothing, and have no desires. He was getting old, so it was easy for him to get sleepy. As a result, the Di Tian emissary of this generation hurried to the door. Sect Master, something big has happened. Di Tian said in panic, using his Mandarin that was full of Shandong accent. What's the matter? The old man opened his sleepy eyes and looked at the 7 feet tall man in front of him. He asked in confusion. Oracle. The Jade Lake's oracle has appeared. The Di Tian emissary was very excited. It was no wonder that this was the first time he had seen an oracle since he became an emissary of the Di Tian at the age of 15. Judging from the color of the oracle, it must have been sent by the mighty immortal Sanking Niao. It's true. The old man wiped his wrinkled face and tried to make himself look more energetic. What did the oracle say? When he asked this question, the Di Tian emissary suddenly became silent, as if it was difficult for him to speak. What's the matter? Is it something difficult to accomplish? The old sect master's heart sank. In these years, under the impact of atheism and materialism, Rosuism had been declining. It was likely that people in the secular world had already forgotten about this once prominent sect. Correspondingly, the influence of Rosuism had plummeted. Now, the sect's assets were only 3 shops on the east side of the street. These shops were the old sect master's hometown in name, but in reality, the secret headquarters of Rosuism had been forcibly dismantled and taken away. No, it's not that. Judging from the content, it seems to be just a sigh from the mighty immortal Sanking Niao, the Di Tian emissary said hesitantly. Hey, you little brat, you can't even speak clearly to me. If you continue like this, I'll ask your father to slap you. The old man said angrily. the oracle said. The Dtion emissary carefully looked at the old man. Then, he made up his mind and said honestly, damn, it actually worked. What does that mean? I don't know either. The two of them looked at each other and were confused for a long time. Su Xinxing leaned on the girl's head and said helplessly, I keep feeling that something is wrong. Teacher, what do you mean? And Xinghua was happily eating the crepe with the black cat on her head. When she heard Su Xinxing's words, she hurriedly swallowed the food in her bulging cheeks like a hamster and asked. I feel that this is not a date at all. But 10 years later, every time you say that you're taking me out on a date, it's just for fun. No, that's not what I meant. Wait, what is my relationship with you in 10 years? Teacher and student. What's with that suspicious pause? How could I lay my hands on a young girl? How much of a scum would I be 10 years later? Wait a minute, Xinghua is about 12 years old now. 10 years later, she will be 22 years old. That doesn't seem to be a problem. No, it's still too strange. By that time, I'll already be able to accept other people without any psychological barriers. Su Xinxing was a little confused. I'm just joking, the girl stuck out her pink tongue and licked off the cream on the corner of her mouth as she giggled. By the way, the person you like is Auntie Yen, right? What? Before Su Xinxing could recover from his shock, he was shocked by the girl's words. In the future, you blamed yourself for Auntie Yen's death for almost 10 years and never had a girlfriend. From the looks of it, the person you like is Auntie Yen, right? No, you're mistaken. Only then did Su Xinxing let out a sigh of relief. It turned out that the girl was just randomly guessing. If that's not the case, then apart from the fact that you have a cold personality, the only other option is to be gay. The little girl was shocked. That's not it. Why are there only two terrible options? Or rather, I don't see the slightest bit of respect for me as your teacher. Su Xinxing slapped the girl's head with a meatball. If you say such strange things again, I'll sharpen my claws on your head. Sorry. That's all. Please spare me. The girl giggled as she apologized. But not long after, she asked curiously, speaking of which, teacher, what do you plan to do next? What do you mean? Hasn't everything been resolved? Su Xinxing replied lazily, next, as long as Qin Xingyan can borrow the artifact that can cut souls, the rest will be easy. No, I'm talking about the weasel monster in Crimson Cloud's Mountain. About that, I can borrow a phrase once said by a great man to explain my thoughts, it's none of my business, bye-bye Yen Song. Didn't Einstein say that? That's about right. In any case, it had killed all the servants who killed that guy's son, so it was not his family's fault. If it went overboard, Su Xinxing wouldn't even need to do anything. The super administrator would naturally take care of it. Chapter 182. My mission was to fulfill Sensei's wish, to change history so that Auntie Xing Yan, who died in an accident 10 years ago, could live on. Calling her auntie might be a little bad. Logically speaking, it would be better to call her sister. But please let me off the hook for this little bit of willfulness. After all, I was still a little jealous of the person that Sensei had been concerned about for 10 whole years. In the past, Sensei didn't take his anger out on my family because of Auntie Xing Yan's death. Instead, he dismantled his own sacred sword of the end and used the sacred sword of Hades, Vandaljo, to cut off half of her family's soul. It was probably at that time that my young self began to yearn for him. Then, due to my unique physique that wasn't affected by the timeline, I caught Sensei's eye and became his disciple. I inherited the sacred sword of brilliance and received training in order to go back to the past to change history. During that time, I gradually realized that I seemed to have fallen in love with my sensei. However, I never expressed my feelings. It wasn't only because of my weak nature, but also because I was afraid that if Sensei rejected me, it would affect our relationship as Sensei's disciple. Today, Sensei and I finally achieved the goal that we worked so hard for 10 years. Shouldn't I be happy about this? Hey, why are you suddenly in a daze? Sensei, who was placed on my head like a sun hat, asked softly. Ah, sorry. The ice cream was too delicious, so I accidentally got drunk on it. I quickly licked the ice cream that was about to melt in my hands and tried to fool him. The strong vanilla taste spread in my mouth and the cool feeling dispelled the heat from my body. My head, which was a little messy because of this, returned to its usual calmness. Sensei, do you want to try it? No need. Also, it's not that I want to criticize you, but even if you like to eat sweets, is it really okay to eat so much at once? Sensei's voice sounded a little weak, but I could tell that he was only concerned about me. This was exactly the same as his future self. Don't worry, don't worry. It's hard to say about other things, but it's okay to eat as much sweets as you want. Thus, I tried my best to let go of the annoyance in my heart. Even if Sensei couldn't see me, I still forced a smile on my face. Ugh, if possible, please control yourself, whether it's in terms of your health or the weight of my wallet. Tisk Lauscher, you're so stingy. I puffed up my cheeks, and acted spoiled like a child. This isn't being stingy. It's being careful and frugal. The teacher hit my head with a meatball, but it didn't hurt at all. Instead, it felt a little itchy. The people on the road looked at us in disbelief. They didn't understand the teacher's words, so they felt strange. All right, teacher, don't forget that we are still on a date. You'll make girls unhappy if you're so calculative. A date. I feel like there's something wrong with this kind of date, Sensei muttered as she lay on my head. Oh, is it because I'm borrowing the appearance of my younger self in this era? But let me tell you, don't look at how flat I am right now. In the future, I will become puff puff puff. What's with that strange onomatopoeia? Although you might not believe me, I'm definitely a lot older than the current anti-Xingyan. I don't want to know such strange information. And that's not what I meant. If I have to say something, I'm the one that's wrong. By the way, Sis Mo Li's figure is still the same as it is now. That's great. Cough, no, remember not to say that in front of Mo Li, okay? Sensei pretended to warn me. Although Sis Mo Li herself doesn't seem to care. Understood, I clasped my fingers together, and made a not-so-standard military salute. Sensei was silent for a while, then suddenly asked, Xinghua, do you have something on your mind? No, teacher, you're thinking too much. Although my heart was beating violently, I still tried my best to maintain a calm expression and replied with a smile, with the sacred flashing sword, there aren't many people in this world who can hurt me. Although it's only enough for one attack. Ah, and you clearly came back to change history, but you didn't help at all. Ah, she was already very concerned about this matter, and you actually added insult to injury. As expected, you're the same as the future. Sensei, you're such an unromantic person. However, just as I was silently cursing in my heart, Sensei's voice became slightly gentler. Thank you. If it wasn't for you, I definitely would have walked down the same path as you did in your timeline. Wu, damn it, I've clearly turned into a cat, and I'm not the same age as the future's uncle, but why is Sensei's voice still so sweet? Speaking at such a close distance, I couldn't even stand properly. What's wrong? Sensei might have felt my footsteps wavering, so she asked with concern. No, nothing, I just want to go to the washroom. If you want to go to the washroom, I remember there's one around the corner. Then she moved to the washroom. Sensei, you can't peep. I took off Sensei's mask and placed it on the flower bed. What kind of eyes are you looking at me with? If you want to peep, you can only peep at me. I don't know what kind of eyes to look at you with anymore. I'm such an idiot. What do you mean by, you can only peep at me? It's like something an idiot would say. From Sensei's expression, she was definitely shocked. Since I didn't really need to go to the washroom, I just flipped the toilet lid over and sat on it like a chair. I covered my face with both hands and was so embarrassed that I wanted to die from the words I said in the heat of the moment. After a while, the heat on my face finally decreased to a normal level. Sigh, I can't go on like this. It's rare to have a date with sensei. I let out a long sigh and summoned the shining sacred sword. I raised it up high towards the lamp above the cubicle. The shining silver blade was already faintly transparent. I don't have much time left. After sorting out my emotions, I went out to meet up with sensei and then began the second round of the date. After getting rid of all the weird thoughts, even if it was just strolling around the shops, the date became very enjoyable. When the movie ended, because sensei wasn't allowed to bring pets, sensei snuck in. It was almost time. When I walked out of the movie theater, the sky was already orange. The setting sun was about to disappear from the horizon and the bright red clouds painted the most beautiful line in the sky. Sensei's Sakura apartment was located in the suburbs and we would pass by a suburban park on the way. At this time, the artificial lake in the suburban park was also dyed with the color of the setting sun. The sparkling water looked very beautiful. I put sensei down on the fake mountain beside the artificial lake and then took 2 steps back towards the lake to face sensei. He seemed to have realized something and looked at me seriously, waiting for me to speak. Sensei, I have to go. That's so sudden. I thought you would stay for a while. Sensei shook his head and said with a look of pity. The reason why I am able to stay in this timeline is because of the power of the shining sacred sword. However, this power is limited. I bit my lips and tried my best to calm my voice down. Moreover, if I don't leave, the me in this timeline will never be able to wake up. Although I have already said it, I still have to thank you again. Sensei looked down and said softly, although we have only known each other for a short time, I feel that you are a good person. But I have already known you for 10 years. So annoying, Sensei. You are still giving me the good person card at this time. I can't cry. I definitely can't cry in this place. Otherwise, wouldn't sensei be worried? Sorry, but what I said is the truth. I am quite happy being with you. Me too. To be able to be with sensei and have a final date. I am really, really happy. Sensei in this era is too young. The more mature uncle version of sensei 10 years later is more to my liking. Wuwa, your words really hurt me. Sensei started rolling on the fake mountain. It's not like that. No matter which sensei, I like them the most. After a moment of silence, I looked up at sensei. Sensei, actually, I like you. I like you the most. Actually, today is my birthday. In the end, I couldn't say it out loud. I could only reveal the same fake smile as before. Hey, why didn't you say so earlier? Sensei immediately became flustered. You didn't even have time to prepare a birthday present. No time. I lifted my hand to look and realized that my body was gradually disappearing from my fingertips. Ah. It's already like this. In the end, Sensei helplessly gave me the cat bell around his neck. Goodbye. Finally, thank you again. My only student. Sensei smiled as he sat on the fake mountain and looked at me with a gentle gaze. Cats usually don't have much facial muscles, so they don't usually have much expression. However, Sensei is different. He has a very human expression on his cat face. At this moment, his expression overlapped with Sensei's 10 years later. Goodbye, Sensei. It's so painful. Traveling through time and space will cause damage to the soul. I already understood this when I went back in time 10 years ago. However, compared to the pain in my heart, the pain in my soul is nothing. After changing history, Anti-Xing Yan won't die. Not only will Sensei not disassemble his holy sword of the end, there will also be no reason for him to go back in time. That way, after Sensei helped my family cut off half of our souls, we will no longer have anything to do with each other. Naturally, I will no longer be Sensei's student. The time that I once had with Sensei will never happen again. From now on, teacher and I will be strangers who have nothing to do with each other. Phew, if I had a body, I would definitely be crying by now. Even though I knew this would happen and Sensei told me before, I still chose to change history so that Sensei wouldn't have to suffer anymore. Why did it have to be me? I originally thought that I was mentally prepared, but I never thought that losing Sensei and losing all the ties I built over the past 10 years would be so painful. Why is it that I, as a singularity, have all the memories from the previous timeline? If I had known earlier, I would have confessed without any hesitation. At least I wouldn't have to return to the cold future without Sensei with such painful thoughts. Sensei, 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 I called out to him again and again, but I couldn't suppress the pain in my heart. In the next instant, my surroundings, including my body, returned. I was in the middle of a grassy clearing. Judging from the time displayed on the holographic billboard, I should have returned to 10 years later, to the day in the past. I had an impression of the surrounding buildings. No, it should be said that they were very familiar. You're joking, right? In the original era, this barren land should have been rented by Sensei in order to research how to cut off the timeline. With the help of the super administrative office, he should have built a dojo. This was also the place where Sensei and I spent the most time together. But now, it was all gone. I opened my palm and held the brightly colored cat bell and the collar that still had Sensei's body temperature in my hand. Then, because of the baptism of time, the bell and the collar decayed at a speed visible to the naked eye, turning into a small pile of ashes. Ah, the last line of defense in my heart collapsed. I knelt in the grass, holding the ashes of my last connection with Sensei, and burst into tears. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. It was so painful that I couldn't breathe. Then, I understood. After 10 years of first love, I had officially fallen out of love. Everything was gone. If I had known that it would be so painful, I wouldn't have known Sensei in the first place. No matter how painful it is, I can't forget Sensei. I will never admit that I didn't know Sensei before. I wiped away my tears and sniffed. Sensei must still be somewhere in this world. I have to go and find him. Then, I have to establish a new bond. I can't just give up like this. I can't. I say, you're already an adult. I only said a few words and you're crying like this. Isn't it too exaggerated? At this moment, an incredulous voice came from beside me. It was a familiar voice that made me feel at ease. Sensei. Turning around, I saw Sensei, who was wearing a white coat as usual, standing there helplessly. How old are you? You're still crying like a kitten. He handed me a handkerchief and said in annoyance and amusement. Why are you here? I took the handkerchief and asked blankly. You can't have forgotten, right? Today is your birthday. Everyone is waiting for you at Sakura apartment. He patted my head. The temperature of his palm was the same as usual. It was so warm that I was intoxicated. You're my student that I'm proud of. Then, he turned and walked in the direction of Sakura apartment. Although something had changed, there were still some things that hadn't. The impulse in my heart made me pull the corner of his shirt. What's wrong? Sensei turned around in confusion. Sensei, actually, this time. I must say it. Chapter 183. Senior, Feng Shaoqing ran into the office with a flyer in her hand. What's the matter? Xiao Jingyi rubbed his eyes and said casually, also, don't call me senior in the future, just call me by my name. Sen. Comrade Xiao, you seem very tired. Feng Shaoqing looked at Xiao Jingyi, who was about to turn into panda eyes, and asked curiously, what did you do last night? Comrade Feng, as a police officer, can you not be so nosy? Xiao Jingyi replied angrily. Since joining this special case investigation team, I don't feel that what I do has anything to do with the police. Fang Xiaoqing sighed helplessly, and then returned to the appearance of a gossipy girl just now. So, what's wrong with you? That has increased again. Now there are almost 200 in my house. Xiao Zhengyi yawned again and wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. If this continues, I'll have to consider sleeping on the floor here. Although Su Xinxing got back the Zhenchuan seal from Fusang, that thing only slowed down the loss of spirit energy. It could only be regarded as a temporary effect, not a permanent solution. Therefore, the lost spirit energy still gathered in Xiao Zhengyi's house under Su Feng's preset work. The final result of this series of events was that the number of monsters in Xiao Zhengyi's house increased. Wow, that's really pitiful. Fang Xiaoqing cast a pitiful look at Xiao Zhengyi. Although she hadn't been to Xiao Zhengyi's house to feel how annoying those monsters were, occasionally one or two monsters would be mixed in with the things Xiao Zhengyi brought. For example, a pen that thought of itself as Xiao Li's flying dagger and a lighter that jumped out to light itself when it saw a couple flirting. Just by looking at the behavior of those guys, she knew what kind of scene Su Xinxing's house was now. Stop, this kind of pitiful look makes me feel even worse. Xiao Zhengyi waved his hand and blocked Fang Xiaoqing's line of sight. By the way, what are you holding in your hand? Although the way she changed the topic was a bit stiff, Fang Xiaoqing didn't want to dwell on the monster in Xiao Zhengyi's house. She placed the flyer in her hand on Xiao Zhengyi's table. I found it in the nearby Wanling Square. Let me see. From a master teaches you the importance of guarding spirits. What kind of nonsense is this? Xiao Zhengyi felt his headache getting worse. Although the layout of the flyer was beautiful, the color and content of the title made him feel like he was looking at a Jinkala advertisement. Under the title, the content was written in detail. To put it simply, the so-called master from May could see the guardian spirit behind everyone. Depending on the guardian spirit, everyone's personality, habits, and luck would be different. Meanwhile, this master could expend his own power to help others change their guardian spirits, thus increasing the other party's fortune. It's not that I want to say this, but how brainless can one be to be fooled by this kind of thing? After reading it patiently, Xiao Zhengyi's eyebrows twitched, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But I heard that this is an unexpected hit. Fang Xiaoqing said helplessly, it seems that many old people in the city already regard this master as a god. Nowadays, swindlers like to target the old. But even if that guy is really a swindler, it has nothing to do with our special case investigation team, right? Xiao Zhengyi threw the flyer back on the table. Instead of giving this to me, you might as well give it to the criminal police unit. As long as this guy swindles 200,000 yuan, it's a huge fraud case. If he's a little more daring and swindles 1 million yuan, it's a huge fraud case. The problem is, that guy almost doesn't take money. Fang Xiaoqing's words made Xiao Zhengyi stunned. He doesn't take money. Yes, it's free of charge, and very few people read it every day. It looks like it's very serious, so many old people believe it. If it wasn't for the fact that this flyer is so urgent, I wouldn't have brought it to the office. Fang Xiaoqing nodded and told Xiao Zhengyi what she knew. Sister, this master seems to have first appeared in Jiangjin half a month ago, but at first, no one paid attention to him. It wasn't until a very unlucky person went through his so-called spirit exchange ceremony and really made a lot of money that people gradually went to him to try the spirit exchange. From the current situation, it seems that the effect after the spirit exchange is generally good, so gradually, more and more people are chasing after that guy. According to what you said, it doesn't seem like it's all a swindler's trick. Xiao Zhengyi touched the stubble on his chin that had not been shaved clean because of the razor's desperate resistance. He muttered to himself thoughtfully, if that's the case, it seems that we do need to investigate a little. But then he sighed again. At this time, the bureau chief actually took the second Xinxing to participate in some kind of work debriefing meeting and won't be back for 2 days. Can't you ask that very powerful friend of yours to help with this matter? Fang Xiaoqing continued to ask. She was undoubtedly referring to Su Xinxing. No way. At present, that guy is still a cat, and even if we don't care about this, I don't know why, but recently, he's been particularly keen on taking in Li Tenghua's third daughter, Xinghua, as a student. For this reason, Li Tenghua's entire family is planning to move to southern Chu. Xiao Jingyi had a pained expression on his face that said, "I don't understand the world of supermen." He helplessly narrated, "Miss Qin Xingyan hasn't returned yet. In Mo Li, only Su Xinxing can order around. That new tenant of Sakura Apartments called Chihaya Fukuyama is from Fusang, so it's not very convenient to ask for help. Looking at it this way, only the two of us can investigate this matter. Is this really okay?" The girl seemed to be somewhat uneasy. After all, she was also someone who had experienced supernatural events, so she naturally understood that some situations were very dangerous for ordinary people like them. "It's fine, because I have a countermeasure." Xiao Jingyi took out a sword hilt from his drawer. Oh, this is the Yuanrong sword from before. What about that Miss Sword Spirit?" Fang Xiaoqing recognized it at a glance, and asked in high spirits. "She's sleeping inside. She said that when I need her, I just need to rub the surface of the sword hilt 3 times. Xiao Jingyi revealed a wry smile. Aladdin's magic lamp? Ignoring the girl's ridicule for the moment, Xiao Jingyi suddenly thought of something after taking out the Yuanrong sword. It seemed that the previous owner of the Emperor's sword was currently studying in Jiang Jin's school. Chapter 184. Sigh. Qin Tuo let out a long sigh. Ever since the incident with the Emperor's sword, he had been sent to Jiang Jin by Ding Yang, who worshipped the immortal master like crazy. Although Jiang Jin was not far from his hometown, southern Chu, and it would take about 1.5 hours to get there by high-speed rail, the cost of the high-speed rail was not a small expense for someone like him who was cash-strapped. Of course, this was not the reason why Qin Tuo sighed. Actually, he was quite satisfied with the current situation. Originally, he had been prepared to be put under house arrest by those people, but they had only warned him not to use the power of the Emperor's sword and had not restricted his personal freedom. Even if he wanted to leave Jiang Jin, he only needed to inform the people in the super administration office. The explanation given to Qin Tuo's parents was that Ding Yang, as the boss of a large company, had met Tu Wazi by accident. He felt that Tu Wazi was simple, honest, and trustworthy. He wanted to nurture Tu Wazi well, so he sent Tu Wazi to study abroad. For this reason, not only did Ding Yang give Qin Tuo's parents a sum of money, he also took care of Qin Tuo's little brother's tuition. Qin Tuo was quite grateful to that guy for this. Sigh. After another long sigh, the Emperor's sword spirit, who had been floating behind Qin Tuo, could not stand it anymore. "You are now the sword master of the Emperor's sword, how can you be so dispirited? You're too unbecoming." The sword spirit girl said unhappily with her hands on her hips. "I'm not the type to study. I said I had 2 days off this time, but there were actually 12 pieces of homework. I'd rather run back to that haunted house and fight with the monsters there than do this kind of thing." Qin Tuo looked exhausted. "That kind of thing, can't you just write it down quickly? Get your spirits up. Don't mess around, you're not the one doing it. Of course it's easy for you to say, I'm not messing around, it's very easy. I don't believe you, unless you do it for me. Let's do it. How can a problem of this level be difficult for me? Oh, so powerful." As expected of the sword spirit of the son of heaven's sword. Qin Tuo applauded in admiration. "Hee, Lord Sword Master, you finally know the benefits of this emperor." This made the sword spirit girl, who was usually scolded by Qin Tuo, very happy. She puffed out her flat chest proudly, completely not noticing that Qin Tuo was showing a plan expression in a corner that she couldn't see. The two of them, or rather, one human and one spirit, chatted as they walked. They planned to go to the supermarket to buy ingredients and then go to the apartment that Ding Yang had rented for them. Because he was afraid that the Emperor's sword would be exposed, Qin Tuo did not live in the school dormitory. However, he did not feel that it was a pity. After all, those little brats in school who had not experienced the hardships of the world had a different outlook on life from him. Putting everything else aside, just his name alone had caused him to be teased many times, both openly and secretly, ever since he had transferred to this school. "Little brother, please stop for a moment." Just as Chintua was waiting for the sidewalk to turn green, an old man who was dressed like a priest but was holding prayer beads in his hand. If one looked closely, one could see the Tai Chi 8 trigrams pattern on his clothes. He gave off a nondescript feeling as he called out to him from behind. "Grandpa, what's the matter?" Because of the recent cases of fake falls, Chintua quietly distanced himself from the other party. After confirming that he was currently within the surveillance camera's range, he responded to the other party. "I see that, little brother, your forehead is full, your face is red, and your bones are exquisite. You are a 1 in a million good seedlings, and your future is limitless. However, at this time, there is a wisp of black gas above your head that has not dissipated. I'm afraid that there is an ominous thing lingering around you, so I wanted to come over and make a good karma with you and give you some pointers. I know of a good tea house nearby. Why don't we go there and talk in detail?" The old man did not seem to notice Chintua's vigilance towards him at all. He was still happily trying to curry favor with him. "What? This old man actually dares to say that I am an ominous thing. Sword Master, don't hold me back. If I don't kill him, I won't be called the Sword of Heaven." The sword spirit girl, who was originally in a good mood, immediately jumped up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, although she was originally floating in the air. She rolled up her long sleeves and pretended to hit the old man. However, she was scared back by Chintua's gaze. This made Chintua feel that he had taught her well. At the same time, he began to deeply reflect on whether he was usually too strict with this girl, so much so that a single gaze could scare her to this extent. Then, he immediately switched to the simple and honest appearance of a country bumpkin. An embarrassed expression appeared on his incomparably simple face. "Oh, master, my mother said that I can't walk with strangers outside. You are treating me as an outsider. Meeting is fate, and naturally, we are no longer strangers." The old man smiled slightly like a Maitreya Buddha. He did not look unhappy at all because of Chintua's refusal. But the more it was like this, the more Chintua did not want to have anything to do with him, regardless of whether this fellow could really vaguely see the sword spirit of the Sword of Heaven or was simply a liar. "No, no, I have to listen to my mother." Thus, he shook his head like a rattle drum. "Master, the light is green. I will leave first." After saying that, he ignored the other party's obstruction and ran directly across the road, disappearing around the corner at the fastest speed possible. "Ha ha ha, Master Sword Master, I realize that sometimes you are quite capable. Did you see that old man's expression just now?" "I am dying of laughter." The sword spirit girl held her stomach and laughed without caring about her image. If it were not for the fact that ordinary people could not hear her voice, perhaps everyone on the street would have been attracted to her. "Son of Heaven, if you meet that old man in the future, try to keep a distance from him." After taking a few breaths, Chintua felt that he seemed to have neglected his training recently and reminded the girl. Why? That kind of old man, I can defeat all of them with one hand. Strong, invincible. Don't worry about why, just do as I say. Chintua said firmly. Although he did not know if he had seen wrongly, but when Son of Heaven was about to hit the old man and his fist reached in front of the old man subconsciously shrank his head. Since there was such a reflex action, it meant that even if the old man could not see Son of Heaven, he could still vaguely feel Son of Heaven's existence. If it was just his own illusion, it would be fine, but if it was not an illusion, then it would be troublesome. These peaceful days had only lasted for a few days, and he did not want to be involved in any strange events again. At this time, the phone that Ding Yang had configured for him rang. By the way, For some reason, the ringtone was King Kong's Sutra. Chen Tuo took out the phone and clumsily unlocked it to look at the caller ID. Super Administrative Office, Xiao Jingyi, so he decisively hung up the phone. Who called? The girl asked curiously. Nothing, it was a wrong number. Chen Tuo answered without hesitation. Chapter 185. Little girl, I see that you have delicate features and exquisite bones. You are a one-in-a-million martial arts prodigy. Coincidentally, I have some martial arts here. Why don't you take me as your master? I will leave the responsibility of saving the world to you. And Xinghua went out to buy soy sauce and came across a black cat sitting on the wall, trying to persuade her. This was not the first time she encountered such a situation. Although her mother said that the black cat was actually a very powerful person, little Xinghua felt that it was not real. Her mother also reminded her to keep a distance from the black cat. The reason was that little Xinghua did not understand the lolicon concept. Thus, she made a funny face at the black cat and stuck out her tongue. No way. Then, she quickly ran back home. After opening the door, little Xinghua found that her father was at home. He was in the living room talking to an uncle she did not know. The content was a little complicated for her, but she could vaguely tell that it was about moving house. To be honest, little Apricot was quite fond of Jiangjin. Although this city had many problems that most big cities had, the pace of life here was a little slow. Moreover, many of the citizens were very kind. Every time she saw riots, murders, and demonstrations on TV, she felt as if she was living in a different country from the people she saw on TV. After changing into indoor shoes, the girl struggled to carry the soy sauce bottle into the kitchen. Her mother was preparing dinner. From the amount of soy sauce, the uncle in the living room would probably stay for dinner. For some reason, the girl felt that the uncle gave her an uncomfortable feeling. Thank you, Xinghua. Li Tenghua wiped her hands on her apron and patted the little girl's head. I cooked some porridge. Bring it to your sister Wenhua. A few days after Wenhua and her sisters caused a ruckus in the city museum, she fell sick. She lay in bed with a fever. Her closest second sister, Berry, naturally stayed by her bedside to take care of her. Thus, the only one left to run errands for her parents was Xinghua. Mother, is Sister Wenhua really okay? Xinghua hesitated for a moment before asking in a worried voice. Of course she is okay. This is, a genetic disease. But Xinghua, don't worry. Soon, we won't have to worry about this disease. Seeing her daughter's worried face, Li Tenghua hugged her and comforted her with a smile. Hearing her say this, little Apricot finally felt relieved. In her opinion, since her parents did not panic after her sister fell ill, there should be no problem. Just as little Apricot was about to tell her mother about what she had seen on the road, she noticed that her mother, who was usually kind and amiable, was looking out of the kitchen window with an annoyed expression. The little girl curiously followed her line of sight. Then, he saw a black cat pressing its face against the glass. Due to the pressure from the glass, the cat's face looked both funny and scary. Li Tenghua sighed helplessly and let go of little Apricot Flower. She quickly walked to the window and opened it, allowing the black cat to roll in and fall into the pool from the window. Help! The black cat struggled in the pool. Sigh. Li Tenghua rubbed her eyebrows and pulled the black cat out. Her face was full of distress. Master Su, can you stop messing around? Although she was not sure if this Master Su knew how to swim, Li Tenghua was certain that it would not be difficult for him to get out of the pool. At the very least, it would not be difficult for him to cut open the entire kitchen counter with his claws. I think that being afraid of water is part of being a cat. If you don't like it, don't play. Because the black cat was wet, its body looked much thinner than when it was furry. At the same time, because of the contrast, its cat eyes, which were not small to begin with, looked even bigger and rounder. At this moment, it was obediently being carried by the other party. Its bright yellow cat eyes stared at Li Tenghua and said seriously. No one is forcing you to be a cat. Even though she had not seen Su Shenxing's human form, Li Tenghua was certain that this cat was not his original form. Soon. According to my estimation, I will be able to change back in 2 or 3 days. Su Shenxing did not mind and said proudly. Is there anything to be proud of? No. Putting aside the meaningless conversation, Li Tenghua threw the black cat back to the ground. Su Shenxing tried to dry his fur while saying, I heard the two over there say that you are moving. As he said this, Su Shenxing used his tail to point in the direction of the living room. That's right. If nothing unexpected happens, my husband will be promoted to become the manager of a branch company in southern Chu. Therefore, our family will be following him. Because there was no need to hide it, Li Tenghua answered generously. Of course, the main reason was that a certain Lulakan had the tendency to develop into a stalker. It was too dangerous for her daughter, so this matter could not be said. That would be very troublesome. Su Shenxing jumped onto the marble kitchen counter and squatted down in distress. Because if it is too far away, it will be very troublesome to teach the disciple. Please don't secretly decide to take apricot flower as a disciple in such a serious manner. Speaking of which, we are moving to avoid you. You should at least pay attention to it. Li Tenghua felt somewhat powerless to ridicule. But for the sake of her daughter's happiness, she still had to retort. However, the following conversation might be a bit more incisive. In order to not let her daughter be affected, so. Apricot flower, bring the porridge up. Otherwise, it will get cold. Li Tenghua took a step back in order to advance. Also, call your father and his friend over for dinner. As long as there were outsiders, Su Shenxing would not speak and would only obediently pretend to be a cat. Therefore, as long as the stranger came over to take a seat, Su Shenxing would not have a seat. Oh, although apricot flower was very interested in the conversation between the black cat and her mother, she still obediently picked up the porridge bowl and walked towards the stairs behind the living room. As she passed by the living room, the girl discovered that the conversation between her father and the strange uncle seemed to have changed. It had turned into all kinds of terms that she could not understand. When the uncle saw little apricot flower, his eyes lit up. He pointed at her and said, You see, actually it's fine to bring your daughter along. In any case, the school is paying for it. It's not bad to let her experience it. It seemed that their conversation had turned to her. Apricot flower lowered her head, not letting the other party see her face. Then, like a wisp of smoke, she ran upstairs. Chapter 186. Even if he didn't answer the phone, Tu Wazi was still caught by Xiao Jingyi. After all, he had just arrived, and there were only a few places he could stay, so it was normal for him to be blocked. Although the Son of Heaven's sword had a certain degree of sensing ability to the Yuan Rong sword, allowing Tu Wazi to leave before Xiao Jingyi and the others arrived, it was meaningless. He didn't think that his legs could outrun the other party's police car. So why did you come to find me? Because it was inconvenient to talk outside, Xiao Jingyi specially took Chen Tuo to the office of the Special Case Investigation Team. I don't know if you've heard of someone from the United States recently. Qigong or metaphysics? Anyway, he's a master in that field. Xiao Jingyi touched his chin and asked Chen Tuo. No, answer complete. Can I go home now? No. I still need you to do me a small favor. Do I have the right to refuse? I'm sorry, Mr. Policeman, I feel that an outsider like me shouldn't get involved in this kind of thing. My life is already so difficult. The local students look down on me. I'm stupid and my grades aren't good. If the people in school see me being arrested by you and brought to the police station, I might as well drop out of school, so Chen Tuo immediately turned on his movie king mode, crying and complaining with snot and tears. Not long after graduation, Fang Xiaoqing, who was relatively inexperienced, was immediately moved to tears and sniffled. But Xiao Zhengyi stared at this little rascal with a fake smile. When Su Xinxing brought this little guy to Jiang Jin, he took the time to investigate this little guy's life. In addition to Ding Yang's understanding of this little guy and Tu Wazi's way of doing things, Xiao Zhengyi had long understood that this seemingly rustic guy was smart and cunning. Therefore, he naturally wouldn't be fooled by Earthchild's cries. If your classmates misunderstand you, I will contact Ding Yang to help you change schools. I guarantee that the teaching environment and learning atmosphere will be much better than the one you're in now. If your results are not good, it's because you didn't do enough questions. Don't worry, I have the 5 years of college entrance examination, 3 years of mock papers exercise book for every subject. It's really an essential medicine for the exam. Take it and do it. Don't thank me. I will contact some tutors to tutor you regularly and check your progress. Chen Tuo immediately put away his aggrieved face and said seriously, ahem, it's all thanks to you that I can continue to go to school. If it's just a small favor, there's no problem. The speed at which his expression changed even made Fang Xiaoqing, who wanted to be a caring big sister to comfort him, dumbfounded. Oh, there's no problem now. Xiao Zhengyi glanced at Earthchild from the corner of his eyes and asked jokingly, aren't you afraid of being seen by your classmates? I think, coming to a place like this alone requires courage. If you don't work hard to solve your own problems, then you'll be like this for the rest of your life. Earthchild didn't feel embarrassed at being seen through at all. Ignoring the sword spirit girl who was laughing at him, he continued to speak righteously. But then he said submissively, so, that exercise book and tutor aren't needed, right? It depends on your performance. Xiao Zhengyi laughed and patted Fang Xiaoqing's shoulder, who was still in a daze, to let the policewoman come back to her senses. Then he took out a stack of files from the drawer about the strange master that he had asked other investigation teams to get before he set out to find Chintua. Unifying the divine religion of the universe? What kind of lousy name is this? Seeing what was recorded, Chintua couldn't help but complain. Hey, I think it's quite awe-inspiring. The sword spirit girl floating beside him said in surprise. Well, it seems that the aesthetics of his sword spirit is somewhat subtly distorted. Isn't this scam too idiotic? Ignoring the complaints of his sword spirit, Chintua flipped through the not-too-thick file in a short while and then came to a conclusion without hesitation. Indeed, because fraud coexists with risks and benefits, and they are both very large and don't require too much effort, many lazy but smart people will always find ways to create some scams to cheat money or other things. However, compared to those scams that are brilliant enough to write a novella, the scam in this file is obviously too crude. To summarize it in a relatively simple way, it is to first get a master who is said to come from the United States of America and let him do something that looks very magical to win the trust of bystanders. After that, he bragged and created the Unifying the Divine Religion of the Universe, which sounds similar to the Flying Sky Noodles sect, and began to use the initial example as a primer to wantonly attract believers. So far, this was the best the cult could do. But according to the usual pattern of deception, once enough people were gathered, the so-called master would reveal his true colors. He would probably use all kinds of names to plunder the wealth of the believers. To be honest, this method is too old-fashioned, but it makes Chintua have a question of, will there really be an idiot who will fall for this? As if seeing through Chintua's thoughts, Xiao Zhengyi sighed, now the number of believers of that strange church has probably exceeded 10,000. Are the people in your big city all idiots? Chintua blurted out involuntarily. But this time, it was not Xiao Zhengyi who answered him, but Fang Xiaoqing. In fact, the reason why so many people fell for it is because the master's practice did have a certain effect. You mean the spirit exchange ceremony, to replace the guardian spirit? Chintua laughed disdainfully. I say, you are also people who can see ghosts, right? Even you have never seen a guardian spirit, how can such a thing exist? If it was the Chintua of the past, he might still have the spirit of believing in it rather than not, more or less believing in it, it was free anyway. But with the sword spirit of the Emperor's sword, and after seeing a scene in the haunted house that mortals might not be able to see in their entire lives, he looked down on this aspect a lot. To make an inappropriate analogy, if a person learned martial arts and became a third-rate master, and had once observed a shocking battle between top masters, then would he still be frightened by the fighting on the street? The so-called one who has seen the blue sea was almost like this feeling. Xiao Zhengyi also had a similar feeling. After all, this guy lived with a group of demons and ghosts every day, that sour feeling. Speaking of which, you have collected so much information, can't the police just go out and arrest people? Chen Toa asked, puzzled. Because there are some problems. Xiao Zhengyi sighed. First, there is no concrete evidence, and second, several of the higher-ups in our public security bureau seem to have been developed into believers. Xiao Zhengyi felt that Chen Toa's gaze was piercing him. In short, I'm not sure whether there is such a thing as a guardian spirit, so we need to do some practice. So Xiao Zhengyi took out his phone. The unifying church of the great universe has a limit on joining, and you have to donate some incense money. At this time, we need the help of another rich brother. Chapter 187. Oh. Jiangjin actually has such a place. Ding Yang stood in a forest and sighed softly. This was the forest to the west of Jiangjin city. In fact, this place was no longer within the boundaries of Jiangjin. It was close to the Zhifei mountain district at the back. It was originally a development zone. For this reason, the villagers in this small mountain village had moved away. However, recently, this place seemed to have been designated as a nature reserve, so the development plan was put on hold. Until now, it still maintained its original appearance. Perhaps because it was closer to the sea, this forest was not like the forests on the mainland. 90% of it was made up of trees and shrubs. It looked very dense. It was more similar to the temperate rainforests in humid England. The towering trees were covered with a thick coat of emerald green moss. The ground was also covered with carpet-like moss, making the whole forest look as beautiful as an oil painting. At the edge of the forest, some traces of the original residence could be seen. The old wooden house was also covered with moss and creepers. In the small yard separated by the few remaining fences, there were broken children's tricycles, stone tables, and parasols. These things were all wrapped in moss. The scenery as far as the eye could see was completely worthy of the word, green field. The feeling of being in a fairy tale world was enough to make people forget the dilapidated wooden house itself. Now, this was the gathering place designated by the unifying church of the universe. When the time came, someone would take them to the campsite. This group of swindlers is quite good at finding places. Xiao Zhengyi could not help but sigh. But then again, I have to thank you for your help. Otherwise, it would not have been easy to sneak in. In order to win the trust of the group of swindlers, Ding Yang took the three of them to spend a lot of money. They spent nearly $500,000 to make the swindlers believe that Ding Yang was not a police officer. They treated Ding Yang and his group as examples of stupid people with a lot of money. And it was not only Ding Yang. Fang Xiaoqing was also from a wealthy family. Although she did not usually show much, the occasional disdain for money made the swindlers feel more at ease. They were sure that they had hooked a fat sheep. By the way, the reason why Xiao Zhengyi wanted to find Ding Yang to pretend to be rich instead of using Fang Xiaoqing's money was purely because of his pathetic self-esteem as a man. After all, once the swindler was caught, the money would be returned. Therefore, Xiao Zhengyi was not afraid that Ding Yang's money would be wasted. Ding Yang, on the other hand, had been stuck at a bottleneck recently. When he heard Xiao Zhengyi mention this matter, he immediately slapped his head and thought, this is definitely the main storyline for the protagonist to earn merits and achievements. Maybe he can even have a fortuitous encounter and improve his skills. Moreover, Chintua, his comrade who had gone through life and death with him, was also here. Therefore, he came to help without hesitation. Of course, even though he said that, Ding Yang did not really care much about this mission. With his current level of strength that was half a step into the cultivation world, as long as he did not really encounter people from the cultivation world, he could almost do whatever he wanted among ordinary people. He really did not care about a few cultists like Cricket. Little brother, what are you doing? After chatting with Xiao Jingyi for a while, Ding Yang noticed that Chen Tuo was squatting on the ground. It seemed like he was doing something. He could not help but ask curiously. Picking mushrooms. Chen Tuo shook the 2 plastic bags in his hands. The ones in the white bag are edible, and the ones in the red bag are poisonous. Although Chen Tuo was not really a child who grew up in the mountains, he was still the most traditional village child. He knew a lot about mushrooms under the influence of the adults in the village. I can understand picking edible mushrooms, but why are you picking the poisonous ones? Xiao Jingyi asked doubtfully. To poison them, of course. Chen Tuo shrugged and answered matter-of-factly, isn't that master very powerful? If that's the case, there must be a way to deal with food poisoning, right? What he meant was that if he could not even deal with food poisoning, what kind of master was he? After experiencing this, there should be a lot of believers who would no longer blindly follow the so-called master. They should be able to wake up. No, I remember that he specializes in guardian spirits. This food poisoning of yours doesn't seem to match his specialty. Although Xiao Jingyi was somewhat moved by this, he still felt that something was wrong. Hey, you guys are breaking the law. Fang Xiaoqing complained to this group of people who had little awareness of the law with an embarrassed expression. Anyway, let's take them first. It's better to be safe than sorry. After collecting enough mushrooms, Chen Tuo stuffed the bags into his pants to prevent them from being discovered by the scammers who came to pick them up. Xiao Jingyi looked at his movements and wanted to say something, but after thinking about it carefully, it did not seem wrong to put the mushrooms in his pants. Speaking of which, why are we camping this time? Ding Yang watched their interaction with interest for a while before asking. Didn't I tell you? Xiao Jingyi scratched his head and realized that he had really been too busy to mention this matter, so he explained, those scammers said that it's to understand the true meaning of the universe in nature, so they organized this camping activity. Only the fat sheep and the most devout believers can participate. While they were talking, not far away, 2 burly men dressed in priestly attire walked over. Chen Tuo was stunned when he saw them, and then he remembered that he seemed to have met a guy dressed in similar attire by the roadside 2 days ago. Xiao Jingyi and Ding Yang looked at each other. The 2 of them had a lot of special experiences. Xiao Jingyi was involved in most of the cases because of Su Xinxing, so their experience and insight were naturally not comparable to ordinary people. They could almost tell that the 2 burly men were martial artists at a glance, and their faces were full of murderous intent. They were afraid that they had injured or even killed people before. Although Chen Tuo was quick-witted and had excellent acting skills, he was still lacking in this aspect. He only felt that the 2 burly men were not to be trifled with. As for Fang Xiaoqing, who did not understand the dangers of the world, she did not have any thoughts about it at all. After confirming the identities of Ding Yang in his group, the 2 men began to lead the way in front. Although the scenery in the forest was beautiful, it had been like this for a long time, and eventually, people would get tired of it. They did not know how long they had been walking, but when no one was in the mood to enjoy the scenery, the scene in front of them suddenly opened up. A small campsite appeared in front of them. Xiao Jingyi looked into the distance and saw a little girl with a black cat. He could not help but look happy, and he turned his head to Chen Tuo. It seems that your mushrooms are not needed. Chapter 188. Su Xinxing followed An Xinghua's family to this so-called Grand Unifying Religion of the Universe camp. Li Tenghua had expressed her doubts about this religion that looked like a scam at first. Moreover, An Wenhuo was still sick, so it was impossible for her to participate in this so-called camping activity. However, because she couldn't dissuade her husband, in the end, only her husband and Xinhua, who had been named to participate, came here. The reason why Li Tenghua let Xinhua come was purely because Su Xinxing would come along. In Li Tenghua's opinion, compared to a strange scam gang, Su Xinxing, who was a lullican, might be safer. Because he didn't want others to think of him as a strange guy, Xiao Zhengyi didn't directly talk to Su Xinxing, who was still a cat. Instead, he grabbed Su Xinxing and pretended to talk to Fang Xiaoqing. "Why are you here too?" "Nonsense, my only student, internally decided, came here. How can I not come? Really, I've only been a cat for a while, and there are so many messy things in Jiangjin." "What is your super student office doing?" "It's the super student office." "Wait, senior, what you care about is wrong, right?" Fang Xiaoqing couldn't help but interrupt their conversation. "Cough, I'm just kidding." Xiao Zhengyi coughed dryly, trying to maintain his face as a senior. "Since you used so many to describe it, it means that there are other supernatural situations in Jiangjin besides this suspicious cult. On the south side, there are 2 monsters that I killed 2 years ago. There are 2 monsters that I chased away 2 years ago on the mountain to the south. Back then, I was too merciful and didn't kill them. Now, they probably think that I'm dead, and they're getting restless. The sea to the east doesn't seem to be too peaceful, but I don't like being in water, so I haven't checked it out yet. The spirit veins in Jiangjin aren't very stable either, which should be the main reason for the frequent occurrences. Or rather, I should say that there are too many things to worry about, and you guys are still stuck in this cult." Su Xinxing pretended to sigh. The cat's face had an expression of anger and disappointment, which looked rather comical. However, Xiao Zhengyi also understood why Su Feng called Su Xinxing the guardian of Jiangjin when he first met him. Indeed, many times, before the super student office, an official organization, noticed the danger, Su Xinxing had already silently dealt with all things that threatened Jiangjin, in fact, threatening his normal life. It was precisely because of this that the ordinary people in Jiangjin were able to maintain their normal lives as usual when the spiritual veins mutated. Putting the useless exclamation aside, Xiao Zhengyi whispered to Su Xinxing, who was annoyed by the cat face and seemed to want to break free from his hand and return to the little girl's arms. "So, in other words, this cult is nothing to worry about? Do you think there's anything that I don't have to worry about? Hair loss. Rising Dragon Lord of Miao Mountain. Ouch." After beating up Xiao Zhengyi with a meatball, Su Xinxing discovered that there were 2 people behind the policeman. They were the sword master of the Son of Heaven's sword that they had brought over from southern Chu, and the old Chinibyu who had clamored to be his disciple. Cat demon. He actually knocked down Brother Xiao in one hit. Ding Yang was shocked. He subconsciously wanted to summon the magical weapon, fake, that he had refined for a long time. Although he had never seen Xiao Zhengyi in action, in his opinion, since Xiao Zhengyi was Great Master Su's friend, he should not be too weak. To be able to kill Xiao Zhengyi in one hit meant that this cat demon probably had some skill and was not easy to deal with. However, Xiao Zhengyi still rubbed his chin and stood up to stop him. Looking at Fang Xiaoqing, who was smiling bitterly, Ding Yang felt that things were not that simple. "Oh right, I haven't told you guys yet. Actually, this guy is. Sigh, no matter how I say it, it doesn't feel right." Xiao Zhengyi thought for a moment, then put Su Xinxing back on the ground. "Why don't you introduce yourself?" Su Xinxing looked at Ding Yang and Chen Tuo, and the sword spirit of the Son of Heaven's sword, looking at him together. He straightened his chest, coughed dryly, and cleared his throat. Then, he said seriously. "I am a cat. You'll know when you see it, right?" Chen Tuo scratched his face in confusion. Although a cute, and a little hairy, Xiaohei cat could speak human language, and its voice had changed to that of a young man, it was enough to give people an incredible feeling. However, Chen Tuo, who had some thrilling supernatural experiences, was still a little disappointed. Could it be that this was it? TSK. So it's not fun to talk to people who don't have literary skills. Su Xinxing began to roll on the ground. After turning into a cat, he especially liked this action. The ground in this forest was almost covered with thick moss. Rolling on it felt as soft as a high-end carpet. It was very comfortable. I'm really sorry for dropping out of school. Chen Tuo was speechless. Then, he gritted his teeth and put the Son of Heaven, who was lying on the ground and laughing, back into the sword. Back to the topic, Old Su, what do you think of this cult? If it's just a fraud group made up of ordinary people, I'll go back and get people to arrest them. Anyway, it's such a big fraud group. Catching them would be a great achievement. Even if there are people above me, I'm not afraid. Our super administrative office is systemically separated from the public security. Strictly speaking, it should be half true and half false. Su Xinxing thought for a moment, then replied, I've seen that there are people in this church who can let others obtain the spirit behind them, but in fact, the spirit behind them has no effect on people's luck. TSK, you know this too. Xiao Zhengyi was full of admiration. By Qin Xingyan. After all this time, it was someone else who said it. Xiao Zhengyi was stunned. Doesn't that make people feel more suspicious? Fang Xiaoqing asked strangely, if it can really change one's luck, then let's not talk about it for now. In fact, it's normal to be an ordinary fraud without the ability to invite the spirit behind them. But if it can't change one's luck, ordinary people can't see it. Then isn't it strange to do so much to help people obtain the spirit behind them? Indeed, I've thought about this, but unfortunately, I couldn't find any useful information. It's good that you're here. I'll leave this matter to you. I'll be responsible for protecting the victims in the camp. If the situation changes, I'll intervene. Su Xinxing thought for a moment and felt that this matter seemed to be very troublesome. So, he simply made a declaration of laziness openly. Anyway, he came this time to protect Xinhua. Investigating the cult was just a matter of convenience. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.